Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku teamed up with Momo for the final exam? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Rubbing his eyes gingerly, Shoyuta yawned as the Class 1A homeroom teacher fought to stay awake, as the exhaustion from the past several nights was finally catching up to him. While his body was ready for a much-needed nap, the same couldn't be said for his mind, as there was still work to be done before the final exam took place. It's bad enough we're changing the format last minute, but saddling me with extra work? Shoyuta silently scoffed at the decision. Yet he refrained from voicing his thoughts on the matter as the principal was the one who put forth the idea, and whose signs should as checks. Whatever complaints he had about the sudden change to the exam were put on hold after he felt a furry sensation between his legs. Glancing down at the tilted floor of his kitchen, Shoyuta saw his cat, Nori, slipping between the gap over and over again. Though as if sensing his gaze, Nori lifted his head and looked up at Shoyuta with emerald eyes. The two stared at each other for a few moments before the cat let out a soft meow. "Look at you." Shoyuta cracked a smile as he knelt and picked up the cat, leaning his body against the kitchen counter. "You're hardly ever awake at this time. What's gotten into you?" he asked while cradling the cat in his arms. Nori meowed at him again. "Yeah, me too," Shoyuta agreed. "Those kids are probably going to give me gray hair like you, old man." His words were followed by an exhausted sigh. Though when he mentioned the cat's age, Nori didn't appreciate the comment. The cat lightly growled at him, followed by a paw to Shuta's chin. "Fine, fine." Shoyuta gently put Nori down on the floor and watched Nori dart into the living room, a scene that got a chuckle out of the usually stern teacher. Standing up again, Shoyuta glanced over his shoulder to see that the fancy coffee maker Namuri got him for Christmas was nearly done. His body was already itching for yet more of the greatest concoction made by humans. In light of the changes proposed by the principal to better test 1A, Shoyuta has been dealing with a fair share of sleepless nights in order to find the best partners for each student. Whether it was reviewing past assignments, footage from training sessions from the last few months, or even taking into consideration the bonds his students have formed with one another, there were no stones left unturned in Shuta's nightly efforts. Almost everyone, he reminded himself at the last minute. While everyone in his class had their assigned partners, the same could not be said for 4 students. Some of his best, in fact. That said, it didn't mean they came without issues. Some more than others, Shoyuta muttered. Images of a green-haired child and a blonde firecracker came to mind. Ding. Saving his thoughts for when he got back to his desk, Shoyuta poured his 5th cup of the night. As he was about to put the pot back into the machine, he eyed his second mug sitting in the dish rack. Shoyuta decided against the idea. It was bad enough that he had joined the ranks of coffee addicts, but he knew if he brought a second cup with him, there was no chance of getting any sleep. Grabbing his filled-up mug, Shoyuta turned the machine off and left his kitchen. When he entered the living room, much like the kitchen, it was small and utilitarian. There was hardly any furniture beyond a beat-up, low couch pressed up against a wall. A fine wooden coffee table with a stack of papers resting on top of it. Shoyuta can already imagine what Hisashi would say if he saw how his gift was being used. "I told him I'd find a use for it." Meanwhile, the rest of his place was unremarkable. But one thing did stand out: a well-used scratching post nestled in the corner with a window nearby that gave Shoyuta a decent view of the area, including his place of employment. That said, his eyes trailed over to the gray fur ball lying on the highest platform. Letting the cat enjoy the rest of his night, Shoyuta walked back into his office, leaving the door open. In contrast to the somewhat neat appearance of his apartment, his office was the opposite. Papers lying everywhere. His crumpled-up sleeping bag was lying in the corner. As for his desk, it was covered in files, papers, and a darkened computer monitor. The chair creaked softly as he took a seat, setting his mug down on an empty spot among the mess. He placed a hand on the mouse and shook it, waking the computer up. His face was soon bathed in bright lights from the screen as he logged back in. That's when he was greeted by a mess of tabs and windows occupying his monitor. His class roster, performance evaluations, and video paused mid-frame on one of his students. The top-ranked academically in his class. Leaning back in his chair, Shoyuta reached out and grabbed his mug. His other hand was on the mouse, where he restarted the footage from the very beginning. It's a match he's witnessed in real time and one he's seen half a dozen times in the past few hours. Momo Yaoyorozu. Shuta's bloodshot eyes watched her match against Tokoyami play out. A fight that could have shown off the brilliant mind she possessed and that quirk of hers that came with limitless applications. Momo Yaoyorozu is out of bounds. Fumikage Tokoyami is your winner. Pausing the footage from the sports festival, Shoyuta saw the uncertainty, embarrassment, and frustration on Ms. Yaoyorozu's face the moment she realized the match was lost. Moments like these proved that no matter how a student got into UA High, recommended or via the entrance exam, no one ever left the school without feeling lost at any point. There was even a point where he considered approaching the student and speaking with her, hoping she could bounce back from this defeat. Her internship torpedoed that possibility. Shaking his head, Shoyuta would be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed when he first learned who she selected. Out of all the names she could have picked, why Umabami? While the search and rescue hero was far from the worst choice, she was definitely nowhere near Shuta's top when it came to students interning with a pro for the first time. Her quirk was best used in disaster recovery. Something that could have been valuable to Ms. Yaoyorozu if she wasn't in the wrong headspace and dragged into the pro's side gig as a model. Ms. Yaoyorozu needed someone who could have helped rebuild, or at the very least begin to rebuild, her confidence. These factors are why he was limited in potential choices for the girl. He's aware of her friendships with the other girls in the class. However, Shoyuta didn't believe any of them could give Ms. Yaoyorozu the push she needed to move forward. Not like the 3 remaining students on his list could. Shuta's eyes glanced over at the list sitting in the corner of his monitor. A list typed out on notepad with the title, Pain in the Butt. Izuku Midoriya. Katsuki Bakugo. Shoto Todoroki. Frankly, Bakugo was never a real option in Shuta's mind. The boy's personality was as explosive as his quirk. From the first real combat training they received to the sports festival itself, Bakugo was intent on reaching the top, no matter the cost. That also meant Bakugo's patience was non-existent. And I have no real interest in destroying a student if they show potential. For a moment, Shoyuta recalled the quirk assessment he carried out on the first day of class, a boy with green hair, showing him a level of grit rare to find in first years. Shoyuta sighed. Maybe one of these days I should apologize to Midoriya, he muttered. Out of everyone in the class, Shoyuta had become intrigued by the idea of partnering up with Ms. Yaoyorozu and Midoriya for the final exam. Before his return from the internships, when the idea of changing the final exam first began, Shoyuta originally intended to partner up with Todoroki and Ms. Yaoyorozu, but that all changed when he saw the enormous improvements made by Midoriya in such a short amount of time. An impressive feat given his performance during the festival. A boy whose only option at the time was to destroy his body repeatedly. Midoriya can move at speeds comparable to his more agile classmates, yet retains that enormous well of strength he came into UA with. Maybe that oaf was right to take Midoriya under his wing, Shoyuta thought, recalling all those days when Toshinori went to have lunch with said student. Beyond his powerful quirk, it was Midoriya's almost suicidal drive to help others that caught Shuta's eye. Clicking on the footage of his fight against Todoroki, the teacher grimaced slightly when he saw Midoriya's appearance. Shattered limbs, broken fingers, and a determined expression that terrified and amazed Shoyuta. To most, they saw Midoriya's attempt to force Todoroki to use his left side as idiotic. Yet Midoriya's reason likely didn't stem from some twisted desire to fight their opponent at their strongest, like Bakugo during the finale. No, there was something more to Midoriya's intentions. And maybe they can help each other. Shoyuta wasn't blind to Midoriya's faults. His tendency to lose focus on the big picture and, most of all, letting his emotions get the best of him. Saving people may be the greatest responsibility of a hero, but Shoyuta feared Midoriya would strive to do so without any thoughts spared for himself. Just like that self-sacrificial oaf, Shoyuta commented, shaking his head. But it sounded like he's already chosen the girl's partner for the exam. As he was about to take another swig from his mug, Shoyuta suddenly felt a weight land on his lap. He glanced down at his lap to see that Nori decided to use his thighs as a place to take a nap. With a free hand, Shoyuta reached down and gently ran his fingers through the cat's fur. Nori let out a content purr, drawing a smile out of Shoyuta. But when he looked back up at the monitor, his earlier thoughts came back to him. A boy with the ability to level buildings and move as fast as a lightning bolt will be paired up with a living fabricator. Quite the dangerous duo if they can work together. Looking back down at the cat, Nori appeared to be on the verge of falling asleep. Shoyuta moved his hand up and scratched behind Nori's left ear. "Well?" Shoyuta asked quietly. "Any thoughts?" The cat answered by opening his mouth in a long, exaggerated yawn. Small teeth flashed briefly, followed by a slow blink as his head dipped and settled more comfortably against Shuta's thigh. The teacher watched this in silence for a second, then continued to run his fingers through its fur. "Figures," he muttered. "You've got it easy, don't you?" 10. God, I think I failed the written portion. Why were there so many freaking questions? I'm gonna smash so many robots today. From his seat on the bus, Izuku heard the variety of comments made by his classmates about the final exam. Most sounded relieved to be done with the written portion, but Izuku knew they weren't out of the woods yet. All that remained was getting out to a nearby training facility and completing the physical portion. Everyone by now heard the rumor from Kendo from Class 1B about how the final exam will have them up against robots like in the entrance exam. Izuku frowned. It can't be that easy, right? Under normal circumstances, he might have believed a fellow UA student, especially after she claimed to be friends with an upperclassman. But Izuku would be lying if he said there wasn't something about today, and that stemmed from the weird instructions Mr. Aizawa gave to the class reps. Midoriya? When he heard his name, Izuku nearly jumped in his seat as he was reminded about the rather awkward situation he found himself in, as sitting next to him on the bus was none other than Yaoyorozu, the class vice president. "Why yeah?" Izuku replied, tripping over his words momentarily as his cheeks turned red. "Apologize if I startled you," Yaoyorozu remarked with a sheepish smile. She followed it up with a question to him. "I only wanted to ask how you felt you did on the written portion? It seems like many of our classmates." Izuku glanced around the bus, noticing how everyone looked utterly exhausted. He cracked a smile at the scene unfolding around him. "Ready to go home?" Izuku supplied, trying his best to keep his voice steady despite the anxiety he was feeling inside. "I, can relate. But I think I did okay, I think." Yaoyorozu giggled. "I'm sure you did fine, Midoriya." "You think so?" She nodded. "I'd be a bit disappointed if the fourth-ranked student in our class failed the written part of our exam today," Yaoyorozu told him. Izuku scratched his cheek with his gloved hand. "What about you?" Izuku saw the way she tilted her head to the side, a curious expression present on her face. I mean, you were nice enough to ask me how I did," Izuku explained. "So I thought it would only be fair to ask how you did on the written portion." "Oh." His question must have genuinely caught Yaoyorozu off guard from the way her eyes widened. A moment later, the somewhat surprised look was soon replaced with her clearing her throat and adopting a straight posture. "Why, thank you for asking, Midoriya. I think I did quite well, but it was certainly a challenging exam." Her posture then, surprisingly, crumpled as she continued speaking. "But I have to say that last section with all those lengthy open-ended questions was more than I expected." "You're not alone there," Izuku admitted, offering up an encouraging smile. "Especially that second-to-last question. It kind of tripped me up with the way it was worded." Yaoyorozu's eyes went wide. "You too?" Izuku nodded. On the surface, he looked relatively calm. Though beneath the awkward smile, Izuku was struggling to believe he was truly holding a conversation with Yaoyorozu. But beyond their talk, it was surprising to hear her talk about the issues she had with the written portion. Even the way she sighed in relief was an interesting sight to Izuku. I didn't expect Mr. Aizawa to toss in such a lengthy scenario, Yaoyorozu said tiredly. And, honestly, I'm not sure my answer was sufficient enough to answer the question correctly. But I doubt we'd have such an extensive amount of time to answer such a question if it were to happen in front of us. What do you mean by that? He asked, brows furrowed. And nothing, Yaoyorozu said, stuttering as she waved her hands. Don't mind me. I was just thinking. Her words did little to dissuade Izuku, but the one-for-all wielder decided to say nothing more on the matter. But the comment she made threw up a few red flags, especially when he saw the downtrodden expression form. Yaoyorozu. Before Izuku had a chance to comment on what she said, the bus they were riding came to a stop. Out of the corner of his eye, on the other side of the window, Izuku and his classmates were greeted by the sight of the enormous training center, nearly on par with USJ. That said, the part that caught everyone's attention was the dozen teachers standing at the entrance to said facility. Something that drew comments from the others. Huh, that's a lot of teachers. Wonder what they're doing here? Midnight is so hot. Smith. Ow. Izuku smiled in amusement when he heard the telltale sign of Azui hitting Mineta with her tongue for his pervy comment directed at one of their teachers. It was followed promptly by him crying out in pain, and others laughing at his situation. Next to him, he saw Yaoyorozu hiding her mouth behind her hand and muttered, "Such vulgarity." Yet the unintentionally humorous scene succeeded in breaking the tension aboard the bus. Ida, in his hero costume, stood up from his seat in the row. Even from his seat in the middle rows, Izuku saw the earnest expression on his friend's face. "Everyone," Ida called out, performing a chopping motion with his free arm. "Let us carefully make our way off the bus in a single file." Unfortunately for the speedster, none of their classmates listened to him. Many were wrapped up in their own conversations, mainly centered on the teachers, before getting off the bus, as it possessed two entrances. Izuku saw Ida hang his head low, but he appreciated Ojiro trying to comfort him with a hand on his shoulder. Yaoyorozu sighed. "I told him not to bother with this kind of thing. At least, you can't deny how seriously Ida takes his responsibility as class rep," Izuku stated, offering up a thin defense of his friend's effort to try and keep things organized. "Potentially," Yaoyorozu admitted after being silent for a few moments. His classmate's lips curled into a small smile as she looked at him. "Ida was right to say you're more of the half-glass kind of guy. It's no wonder that you two are such good friends." Izuku blinked several times. The class vice president didn't elaborate any more on the topic as she got up from her seat and walked down the aisle, heading for one of the exits. She glanced over her shoulder, asking, "You coming?" "Why yeah." Getting up from his seat, Izuku followed Yaoyorozu off the bus along with Ida and Ojiro. They soon caught up with the rest of their classmates, eventually arriving at the facility's entrance. That's where they were greeted by the sight of numerous teachers. But for some reason, Izuku couldn't shake this odd feeling in the back of his mind that something was off. Why are there so many teachers? He mentally questioned, even noticing heroes like Power Loader were among them. He teaches in the support department. Why would he be here? Unless? That's when Izuku's eyes went wide as he realized what was going on. His classmates started to point out what was happening as well. "Sure are a lot of teachers," Jiro pointed out. 5, 6, 8, 9 of them? Their invisible classmate counted aloud. "You're right," Hagakure agreed with the purple-haired girl. "But why are they here?" she asked. That's when Mr. Aizawa addressed them. "I see all of you are here. Now, let's not waste any more time. Today, you will be taking the practical portion of your final exam, but let me make something clear. You can fail this exam. A spot on the trip to the training camp isn't the only thing at stake today." Glancing at the faces of his classmates, whatever confidence they had about the practical portion was beginning to evaporate rapidly. In years prior to yours, the practical consisted of you taking on robots used during the entrance exam, Mr. Aizawa explained to them. His voice took on a more serious tone. "However, unlike most first-year students, you've all had the displeasure of encountering true villains and criminals." Izuku's mind dug up the memories of the situation at the USJ and, more recently, the fight against Stain in Hosa City. but a serial killer who went out of his way to save me. Out of everything that happened on that fateful night, Izuku was still hung up on the fact that Stain willingly went out of his way to help him. And that's why we've decided to change the format to better reflect your experiences as students. Instead of taking on machines, you will be paired up with a classmate and be given the task of going up against one of us, Mr. Aizawa stated firmly. Come on. Seriously? However, Mr. Aizawa wasn't finished as he gave them a stern look, prompting everyone to suddenly go quiet. Now, your partners have already been selected. A smirk formed. Your battle moves, your grades, and even your friendships with one another have been taken into consideration. Most of all, you all should know who your partners are already. That final bit of information threw Izuku for a loop, then his brain actually decided to work. His eyes went wide for a second time today as he glanced at Yaoyorozu, who must have come to the same conclusion as she looked in his direction. Others started to catch on, followed by their reactions when they realized who was their partner. Wait, what? Great, I'm with the class pervert. But that's mean of ya. While everyone was adjusting to these new circumstances, Izuku noticed Mr. Aizawa looking directly at him. As if things couldn't get worse, Izuku's brain worked for a second time today. Oh no. He must have said that louder than intended because it caught the attention of his partner for the exam. Midoriya, what's wrong? Yaoyorozu asked. Mr. Aizawa cut in. I can answer that question because it's time for each of you to know who you'll be fighting. His lips turned into that creepy smile. And, for figuring it out, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu, I'm your opponent. Aizawa? Despite what many people believed about him, Toshinori was far from the most sociable person in the world. Years of doing interviews, late-night talk shows, and even starring in a few films helped improve his public speaking skills and how to handle certain situations. That said, he knew there was something much different when the person sitting across from him on the empty bus was his grumpy coworker. That same coworker, who appeared to have been napping, slowly stirred from his slumber and cracked open an eye, revealing it to be bloodshot as usual. What? Clearing his throat, Toshinori found the courage to push on. I wanted to ask you something. We didn't get much of a chance to speak after this morning's meeting, but it's regarding young Midoriya and young Bakugo. I thought you planned. Those plans changed, Aizawa cut him off bluntly. And why did they? The underground hero didn't answer his question immediately. Instead, Toshinori watched Aizawa lean back against the bus seat and arms crossed. Is such a question really relevant right now? Aizawa asked. I was just. His coworker sighed loudly, stopping Toshinori in his tracks. Curious. Midoriya's teacher followed it up with him shaking his head. Of course, you want to know about the problem child. As long as it involves that boy, you're never too far behind. I swear, you act like the boy's father sometimes. Aizawa's comment caught Toshinori by surprise, drawing an embarrassed reaction from Japan's mighty hero as he began to trip over his words. That's just absurd, Aizawa, Toshinori replied, offering up a poor defense. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked away from the underground hero. I only ask because, well, as you know, the boy's power is immense and I only thought it'd be prudent to help a talented student who possesses a great quirk. Aha. Toshinori. When he heard his name, the number one hero stopped. Aizawa looked him in the eye for several agonizing moments before saying whatever was on his mind. I don't care if you find his quirk noteworthy or not. All I ask is that you keep your favoritism of Midoriya in check. That's all. I know. You care for the boy, don't you? The question was blunt enough that Toshinori didn't have an immediate response. For a moment, the eighth wielder of One for All remembered the months he spent alongside the boy's side, helping him prepare for the entrance exam to the progress he's made since setting foot inside UA. It's not that he couldn't come up with a feasible lie. It just wouldn't feel. Shaking his head, Toshinori looked up at Aizawa. I care for him as any teacher would, he said with a fragile smile, hoping it'd satisfy his coworker's curiosity. I genuinely want to see young Midoriya succeed and become a hero like he's always dreamed of being. Toshinori furrowed his brows. What? Nothing. No, Toshinori said, sitting up straighter in his seat. That little noise you made was not nothing. You have something more to say, don't you? Come on, what's on your mind? The neutral expression Aizawa maintained softened somewhat. It's an idea I've had bouncing around in my head for a while now. Though it only really started after the sports festival, looking back on the entire year so far, it's been gnawing at me. And that is? You met Midoriya prior to him coming to UA, didn't you? It sounded less like a question and more like a factual statement coming from Aizawa. There was no missing the sharpness behind his words. It goes a long way in explaining why you've been in the boys' corner from the first day, before teaching a single lesson. And, please, don't use the footage we saw during the entrance exam as an excuse. One glimpse of power isn't enough to make me believe you, of all people, would get behind a random kid's potential on day one. Alarms went off in Toshinori's mind. The novice teacher put his hands up and smiled awkwardly. That's a big assumption you're making there, Aizawa, Toshinori said, fumbling over his words. Potentially, Aizawa conceded, offering up a simple shoulder shrug. But it does a long way in helping to explain why you're always spending lunch with the boy. Believe me when I say, most of us are curious why Midoriya receives that offer and not any of his other classmates. And I told you, I don't care if you really are Midoriya's father or if you knew him before you. So long as you understand that not everything that happens with him is your concern, then we'll be fine, Aizawa sternly warned him. Despite his urge to claim otherwise, Toshinori knew Aizawa had a point. He may be young Midoriya's mentor, but inside the walls of UA High, Aizawa was responsible for the boy's overall education and doing what's best. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious about the last-minute swap. A question the other faculty members shared alongside the number one hero. Sorry, Toshinori muttered. It's fine to keep tabs on the boy, Aizawa told him with less of an edge to his tone. It's normal for us teachers to pick out certain students who can go far in their careers, but our role is to ensure all of them can grow and get to a point where they can succeed without us. When he heard those words, Toshinori thought back to his conversation with Tsukachi following the arrest of Stain and the information they learned from the Momo. I failed him. Those words have been bouncing around Toshinori's mind for several days and nights. Even now, after all these years, that monster's laughter never left his nightmares. Toshinori resisted the urge to scowl as he knew what his return meant. Young Midoriya now has to make up. For my failure. Master, I'm sorry. I thought I avenged you. All of you. An image of Midoriya popped into his mind. A tearful boy, overcome with joy and relief, learning he could become a hero. That memory was abruptly cut off by the cries of Night Eye. If you continue like this, you'll face off against a villain and die an unspeakably gruesome death. Toshinori. Breaking away from his thoughts, the number one hero saw Aizawa looking at him. We're at your testing site, Midoriya's homeroom teacher said, gesturing with his thumb to the walled-off city right next to them. All right, Toshinori murmured, getting up from his seat. He began to make his way toward the front of the bus, but was stopped when he heard Aizawa's voice. Just so you know. When Toshinori looked over his shoulder, he found Aizawa looking straight ahead, never making eye contact with him. My primary concern isn't Midoriya. With that, the man didn't say another word. It was only after Toshinori stepped off the bus and watched it leave that he realized what Aizawa meant. A smile formed. He's just a giant softy on the inside like Ms. Kayama said he is, Toshinori thought, remembering the few conversations he's had with her. 10. In the short time he spent wielding One for All, Izuku has grown used to dealing with whatever comes his way. Whether it was learning to better use the quirk gifted to him by All Might or fighting dangerous villains like Shigaraki and Stain, all of that paled in comparison to today's task, as it was outside of the norm for him. Teaming up with Yaoyorozu, the vice class rep, to defeat their homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa, to pass the practical element of the final exam. And getting to go to the training camp, Izuku added. What do you think? Izuku, sitting next to her on the bus heading for their testing site, adopted a thinking pose as his hand rested on his chin, arms crossed, and his foot lightly tapping the ground. While part of his mind was occupied with going over the plan created by Yaoyorozu, he didn't miss the way she's been acting this entire time. Nervous, stuttering, and genuinely unsure of herself as she explained the plan she came up with. Izuku was ready to give his thoughts, then closed his mouth and frowned at her. Yaoyorozu, I know this isn't any of my business to ask, but… He took a deep breath. Are you okay? Izuku asked. Her response instant. I'm fine, Yaoyorozu replied without hesitation, unable to look him in the eye. She sighed. I have a lot on my mind. That's all, Midoriya. Izuku hesitated to push any harder. It may have worked during the sports festival in getting through to Todoroki, but that was only because the half-hot and half-cold user was stubborn. Literally beating words into him was Izuku's only option at the time. Yaoyorozu, on the other hand, isn't Todoroki. Instead, he decided to take another approach to the situation. Clearing his throat, Izuku returned to the original question she asked him. Your plan. He didn't miss the way she perked up at the mention of it. It's a good one, Izuku said truthfully. You think so? Izuku nodded with an encouraging smile. I do. I think your plan considers a lot about his quirk, including how to mitigate, and I just think it's pretty cool how you were able to come up with it on the spot, he replied, but hadn't realized he was slipping into his tendency to mutter. Using smoke grenades and flashbangs comes with its own risk, but they should be more than enough to hinder our teacher's quirk when we face him during the exam. With his line of sight diminished, Mr. Aizawa will likely try to keep moving to prevent either of us from getting a beat on him, but it may open him up to opportunities for us to hit him. Midoriya? When he heard his name, Izuku snapped out of his thought process and blinked a few times. He turned toward Yaoyorozu and asked, Did I just? Yes. An embarrassed expression appeared. Am I bad? Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck. I do like your plan, he repeated. I just like thinking out loud, a lot. Maybe I should stop doing that. Unexpectedly, Yaoyorozu giggled at his self-deprecating comment. It's not a problem, she told him with a smile. The first one he's seen appear on her face since learning they were partners. I've heard about your mutterings from Ochako. Seeing and hearing it for the first time is definitely an interesting experience. I can say that much with certainty. A good interesting or like a bad interesting? Yaoyorozu tapped her chin a few times before giving a verdict. I'd say it's a good interesting, she said with a slightly amused smile. I like learning new things about my classmates and, well, you are one of the few people I haven't had a real chance to speak with, until now. And you wanted to talk to me? She nodded with a soft smile. Wow, that's… Izuku tried to find the right words but failed. Finding out a classmate like Yaoyorozu actually wanted to speak to him was not something he expected today. Though it did allow him to say something he's kept locked away for some time. By the way, I wanted to say sorry to you, Yaoyorozu. His sudden apology caught the dark-haired girl by surprise. Huh? Yaoyorozu said, furrowing her brows and tilting her head to the side. She looked at him for a few moments and asked, Why are you apologizing? Back when we voted for class president, I remember you had the second most votes after me and, I kind of never asked whether you wanted the role back then, Izuku explained with red on his cheeks as he occasionally glanced Yaoyorozu's way, even recalling what she said. I just handed the class president title to Ida. I imagine you must have been at least a little upset you got looked over. Yaoyorozu's brows softened up. You're apologizing about that? She questioned. I just thought. Midoriya, his partner calmly called out, making him stop speaking. First, I'm sorry for interrupting you. That said, while I appreciate you feeling this way, there's no need to apologize. Honestly, I'm fine with the role I was selected to do, she said with a small smile. You sure? I am. Believe me, I've come to agree with your decision to hand the role to Ida, Yaoyorozu admitted, folding her hands on her lap. Working with him the past several weeks has been wonderful. Though he does bring a certain level of intense. Izuku guessed. His answer was on the mark from the way Yaoyorozu sheepishly smiled. Very much so, she replied in a tired and amused tone. Her expression did morph into something akin to curiosity. But I do have to say, I do wonder what it would have been like if you stayed in the role? Izuka never received an answer as the bus they were riding on came to a full stop, followed quickly by the robot driver telling them that they had arrived at their destination. Come on, Midoriya. Sure. Much like earlier today, Izuku was left stunned by his classmate. First, she mentioned how he's a half-glass kind of guy. Now, she's wondering what it would have been like if he stayed class president. Izuku's brain was struggling to compute such information, though he did find his way onto his feet, reminding himself of their upcoming match with Mr. Aizawa. 10. Shouldn't you be? Ochako's question was picked up by her classmate, Todoroki, who looked eerily calm for someone who has the unfortunate task of taking one of their teachers and the most powerful hero in Japan, All Might. I would be, Todoroki said, hands in his pocket and back against the railing. His composure didn't last for long as the dual quirk user sighed. But that requires having a partner who can say more than 5 words before trying to hurl insults or cursing you out. Alright. Out of everyone, Ochako felt like Todoroki got the short end of the stick with having Bakugo assigned to him as a partner for the exam. Though deep down, she suspected it didn't matter who was paired up with him, all of them were bound to run into the same problem. Maybe Deku would have been able to get through his thick skull, she thought. There's nothing I can do, Todoroki continued, glancing over his shoulder at the several screens with live footage of those currently taking their exam. Even from where she stood, Ochako saw him focused on Deku and Momo. All I can do is try and salvage the situation, but I have a feeling our fate's already sealed. Isn't that being a bit of a defeatist? Ochako pointed out. Todoroki shrugged. It is, he admitted without shame. I may not know Bakugo like Midoriya does, but I do know he can't be forced to do anything unless he wants to. And if he doesn't want to do something, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. More or less. That kinda. This is, Todoroki said, finishing her sentence with his arms crossed. I just have to hope those weights slow down All Might enough for one of us to get through the gate. Otherwise, we fail. Hearing his plan, Ochako didn't know what to say. Todoroki is considered one of the strongest kids in their class by a large margin, and he was pretty smart from what others have told her. And here I am being worried about the exam because of my partner. Ochako cringed a bit on the inside, realizing she was far better off with Aoyama as her partner. Far from the most useless classmate. I also don't envy your situation either. Ochako said. Todoroki turned his head in her direction. Not only are you taking on your idol, but you also have the added responsibility of coming up with a strategy to take down 13 or a way around her, as I doubt Aoyama will be of any serious help, the half-hot, half-cold quirk user stated, his words laced with the usual bluntness that made him cool or a JRK depending on who you talk to. I wouldn't say he's that bad, Ochako retorted weakly, smiling awkwardly as she couldn't entirely deny everything Todoroki said about her partner. Are you certain of that? She saw him raise a brow, then pointed at her partner, who was standing in front of a reflective surface doing a series of poses like he was a model. Ochako's face fell flat, followed by her sighing. Looking away from the scene of the crime, she crossed her arms on top of the railing and placed her head down. By the way, Ochako said, glancing at Todoroki, how did you know 13's my idol? She asked him, deciding to change the topic. Midoriya mentioned it once. Ochako's heart rate picked up when she heard his name. He did? We didn't have much to do in the hospital when we were being treated for our wounds, Todoroki said to her, shrugging his shoulders. Other than staring at our phones all day, we talked, especially Midoriya and I. He mentioned how if I was going to make an effort to befriend our other classmates like you and Ida, then I should get to learn about you guys. One of the things he mentioned was 13 being your personal idol. She smiled. That's nice of you. To this day, hardly anyone knows what was said between Todoroki and Deku during their match in the sports festival. It was definitely intense from the expressions on their faces, but that's all anyone could do. Kyoka said the noise from the crowd, Mr. Present Mike, and the battle itself drowned out their words too much for her to hear. But it was obvious to everyone that Deku did or said something that drove Todoroki to use his left side. A first for everyone, as he hadn't ever used it openly in any training sessions up until that point. Even now, he only uses it sporadically after the internships. I think it's the least I can do, Todoroki replied, looking up ahead at the screens. I wasn't very kind to any of you, especially Midoriya, earlier on in the year. His voice trailed off, almost as if he didn't know what else to say. It's okay, Ochako said, appreciating his feelings on the matter. The fact that you're willing to make up for the start of the year is enough in my books. Plus, I don't think you need to worry about Deku and how he sees you either. You're not wrong about Midoriya. Though I do have to thank you for being willing to give me a chance, Todoroki stated in a grateful tone. Ochako decided to give him a thumbs up. Just make sure to give it your best, Todoroki. I will. As if sensing the end of their conversation, the training facility's PA system went off. Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo, please report to your testing site. The bus is waiting outside, an automated voice announced. And here we go, Todoroki muttered, a sliver of determination breaking its way through to the surface, but not before turning her way. I wish you luck on your exam if I don't return before it's your turn. While they haven't interacted very often since the start of the year, Ochako saw the effort Todoroki was putting in, even in a brief conversation like they were having. You too. She shot him a small smile. I hope you and Bakugo pass the exam and maybe even kick All Might's butt. Todoroki didn't look convinced, but his usually stoic expression budged a tiny bit. Ghost of a smile appeared. I doubt it. He followed it up with a nod. But thanks. With that, Ochako watched as her classmate turned and walked away, heading for the entrance of the lobby. Even from this distance, she spotted Bakugo leaning against a wall with an angry face, his arms crossed, and literal steam rising from his hands. I hope Deku and Momo are having better luck, Ochako thought. 10. Arriving at the imposing steel doors that led to their exam site, Momo tried to appear calm despite the pit forming in her stomach the longer she stared. Her mind is trying its best to go over the plan she put forth. But will it work? A question that's been nipping at her heels relentlessly since first proposing it. Yaoyorozu. Why yes. On her right, she noticed Midoriya almost jump back as he was likely taken aback by her over-the-top response to calling out her name. Despite not knowing him for long, Momo saw the way his face scrunched up, almost as if he was contemplating an idea. Do you want to go over the plan again? He asked, those bright green emerald eyes of his containing a seriousness that was becoming more and more well-known among their class. Momo bit the inside of her cheek, unsure of what to say in the moment. One side desperately wanted to go over it and make sure she understood her role in the plan, fearful she might forget and screw up badly. Yet a small but more vocal side disagreed, saying she couldn't say yes to his question. She failed once already. How can she be a hero if she couldn't stand on her own 2 feet? Is something wrong? Midoriya asked. His usually friendly tone was no longer present. Instead, those green eyes of his turned sharp yet never lost that brightness. I know we haven't ever talked before today, but I can tell something is off. Momo bit the inside of her cheek. Just nervous, she lied through her teeth to him. Fighting against Mr. Aizawa has me more worked up than normal. That's all. I'll be fine. I'm sure. I can relate to that. Despite her best attempt at lying to him, Midoriya didn't look fully convinced by the lie. Truth be told, Momo suspected it did the complete opposite and only made him suspicious of her. What about you? Momo quickly followed up, hoping to steer the conversation away from her. I have my own reservations about fighting our homeroom teacher. What about you though? How are you feeling? Honestly, Midoriya said, his eyes looking down at his palm. He curled his hand into a tight fist as his lips formed a smile. A confident one that would have looked out of place on him at the beginning of the school year. I know Mr. Aizawa's a tough opponent, and I know he won't go easy on us. But you and I have a great chance against him, especially if we stick to that plan of yours. And if it doesn't work? Momo's back straightened out, realizing what she said aloud. A moment later, she closed her eyes out of fear as she didn't know how Midoriya would react to her question. Then we'll figure something out if that does happen, Midoriya replied, answering her question. Momo opened her eyes and turned toward her partner, looking at him with a hint of skepticism. That serious glint in his eyes from earlier faded away, replaced with his usual cheerful self. A mood she couldn't understand. But something can go wrong? She asked him, grabbing at her arm while her words were laced with uncertainty about their upcoming match. No plan ever survives contact with the enemy. I can't help but feel as if I'll screw up somehow. Why would you think that? Midoriya asked her. The day of the sports festival rose back to the forefront of her mind. Momo frowned, remembering her inability to do anything on that day. I stood there like some child who didn't know what they were doing, she thought, chiding herself for her abysmal performance against Tokoyami. Now, look at me, I'm partnered up with someone who's made real progress, unlike me. She realized Midoriya was expecting an answer and, like earlier, lied through her teeth. It's just, to be completely transparent with you, I'm expecting Mr. Aizawa to prioritize you as the bigger threat. You possess the strength and speed to make the match difficult for our teacher. And that's why you're the key. Momo furrowed her brows. What? You are. Midoriya nodded with a bright smile, his gloved hands curling into soft fists as he held them by his face. His encouraging words were a surprise to her. Out of everyone's quirks, yours fascinated me the most with its limitless applications, and combined with the awesome skills you've shown off, I know you'll come through, Midoriya said without any hesitation. While she never finished her response, Momo didn't expect Midoriya to have such faith in her. Didn't he see my performance in the sports festival? I failed badly. I even made a basic mistake in selecting Iwabami for my internship, she thought, further disparaging herself. Can I ask you something, Midoriya? Sure, what is it? He asked. Momo took a deep breath, then let out a shaky exhale. What did you think of my performance during the festival? It's a question she's been afraid to ask a single person in the days after it concluded. The closest she got was asking Kyoka, but backing out from the dread of whatever her best friend might have said. Ochako said you took notes on virtually everyone's fights, even your own against Todoroki. So I was wondering what? Momo hesitated, gripping her arm tighter. I was wondering what you thought of my pitiful showing against Tokoyami. The silence was palpable as Momo stood there, looking forward at the gates. She bit the inside of her cheek as she waited either for Midoriya to give her an answer, likely criticizing her performance, or for the exam to begin. Then, Midoriya spoke up. Cute. Reaching up with his finger, Shoyuta flicked it across his phone screen when the latest cat video he finished watching ended. Another short started playing automatically, but Shuta's attention wasn't fully on the clip as his mind was elsewhere at the moment. A gaunt face with bright blue eyes popped into his mind. He acted really strangely. The homeroom teacher recalled their interaction while on the bus to their respective testing site. At the time, Toshinori's behavior barely registered to Shoyuta at the time, but looking back on how their conversation unfolded, a feeling of suspicion gnawed at him. And it all started when I poked fun at the idea of him being the boy's father. He knew there wasn't any truth to the idea. If it were real, Toshinori would have had to disclose such a detail to the school before Midoriya's admission. That said, it did little in putting a stop to the rumor mill as Shoyuta heard his fair share of gossip among several of their co-workers about how Toshinori spent most of his lunches with the problem child. Still, Shoyuta always wondered what they spoke about. Whatever his thoughts about the nature of the relationship between Midoriya and Toshinori, Shuta's thoughts were broken up when he heard a soft chime come from his phone. Furrowing his brows, he flicked the top of his phone screen when he saw he received a text message to see who sent it. Shuta's normally stoic expression softened up. We saw the name. Shino, how's the test going? He started typing out a response, knowing there's a decent chance the exam could start any minute. If he was going to respond, now would be his best opportunity. Shoyuta, hasn't started yet. Shino, anyone fail? Navigating his phone, Shoyuta saw the group chat for the teachers focused on the first years and found that a few of them had already wrapped up their exam. Most of his students passed. A few failed. He sighed at the picture posted by Nizu, as he appeared laughing like a maniac while drinking a cup of tea with a caption underneath it. Humans never learn, do they? And he says he's not crazy, Shoyuta murmured, shaking his head lightly. Going back to his messages, the underground hero resumed his little conversation with Shino. Shoyuta, a few students. No one surprising so far. Shino, I'm sure it won't be too bad. By the way, I was thinking it was time we get Nori a new scratching post. Shoyuta, you spoil him too much. Sitting up, the homeroom teacher kept looking down at his phone despite being so close to the edge of a building rooftop. However, in a rare moment of losing composure, Shoyuta received a picture from Shino. An embarrassing image of him asleep on the couch with his head resting on Shino's lap, but the worst part was the bright red lipstick mark on his forehead, while the clearly responsible brunette had a Cheshire-like grin on her face. Shino, it'd be a shame if your students accidentally saw this picture of their teacher, babe. Shoyuta, fine. We'll get him a new one after the camp. The next message he received was a heart emoji, followed by one blowing a kiss. Despite his grumpy response to her somewhat playful attempt at blackmailing him, Shoyuta found it difficult not to let out a soft chuckle. It was rare, but out of everyone in his life, Shino found ways of making him laugh. After the conversation between them came to an end, Shoyuta pocketed his phone before standing up. That's when he was greeted by the enormous faux city chosen for Midoriya and Yaoyorozu. Buildings that rose high into the sky, fully paved streets, and everything in between to depict a fully functioning metropolis. Lowering his goggles, Shoyuta clicked his teeth at the choice made by the principal. Did he really need to pick the biggest one? He complained quietly. I swear, this is going to be more annoying for me to get around than them. His remaining thoughts were put on hold as a familiar siren went off in the distance, followed by the PA system built into the training site going off. Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu, your final exam has now commenced, the synthetic female voice stated, its voice heard across the whole area. Please either capture the villain, erase her head, or escape the zone. You have 10 minutes starting now. Let's hope my hunch is right about them. With that, Shoyuta jumped off the rooftop and onto the building several feet below. 10. Midoriya? Yeah. Glancing down at his classmate, who was being carried in his arms, Izuku saw Yaoyorozu's cheeks turn redder by the second as she barely made eye contact with him. I'm curious as to how you're feeling, she mumbled, her voice dampened by the rush of air around them. I know this arrangement may be a bit uncomfortable for you, but please do not be afraid to speak and say so. It's fine. Despite his embarrassment about carrying a pretty girl like Yaoyorozu in his arms, Izuku's brain tried to rationalize the situation by reminding him why he was carrying her. Are you positive? She asked, unintentionally moving her body as she was being carried in his arms, and Izuku would be lying if he said he wasn't flustered by the movement. His blush deepened in color, turning crimson as he cleared his throat. Can't really complain, he replied sheepishly, offering an awkward smile to hide his embarrassment. I was the one who suggested the idea of, well, you know. For good reason, Yaoyorozu added quickly, tightening her arms around his neck as he leaped across a gap between two buildings. A reminder of how physically close they were to each other. Though Izuku's focus was more on her words. How are you feeling? His question caught her off guard for a moment as she looked at him, her head tilted slightly to the side in confusion, which prompted Izuku to keep talking. I imagine producing all those support items must not have been easy on you, he pointed out to her. Yaoyorozu's earlier embarrassment faded for a moment, replaced with a small but genuine smile. It's nothing too major for my quirk, but I appreciate your concern, Midoriya, she replied. Though her smile didn't last, it did turn into a slight frown as she focused on him. How are you feeling, though? You're probably having to expend a rather significant amount of stamina while carrying me and the backpack around the city, she said, reminding him about the yellow bag. Izuku chuckled. I wouldn't worry about me. He remembered those days when he carried All Might on his shoulder, which was followed by him lightly shaking his head. Believe me when I say I can carry you all day if I have to. However, his brain realized what he said. Oh God, I didn't mean to make that sound so weird, Izuku stammered out, blushing harder than he thought was possible. I didn't mean anything by that. Yaoyorozu giggled. Relax, Midoriya. I know what you meant. Really? She nodded at him. I do. While he would have enjoyed continuing their conversation, Izuku saw the building that Yaoyorozu had pointed out to him right before the match started. A 10-story apartment complex with a flat rooftop that was surrounded by concrete walls. Increasing his limit, Izuku raced up the side of the building, using the various ledges, windows, and fire escapes to make his way to the top. Feeling the surge of power through his body, the One for All user soon reached the top of the building and landed on the rooftop, his feet sliding across as he came to a stop. We're here, Izuku announced. Putting her down gently, Yaoyorozu took a glance around the rooftop before looking down at her wrist, where she was wearing a watch. And it hasn't been more than 90 seconds. She smiled. You've come a long way, Midoriya. Blushing at the compliment, Izuku scratched his cheek with his gloved hand. It's no big deal. It seems she was right about you. Izuku perked up at the comment. Huh? He never received an answer from Yaoyorozu as she walked away, heading for the concerned wall that enclosed the rooftop. Taking out the pair of binoculars she made earlier, Yaoyorozu began to scan their immediate surroundings, searching for any signs of their teacher. Izuku, meanwhile, gently took off the backpack he was carrying and opened it up, revealing it to be filled with several smoke grenades and flashbangs. Though one item did stick out from the rest. Anything? Izuku asked, looking up from the backpack as he took a pair of smoke grenades, stuffing them into the tactical pouches on his belt. After he was finished with it, Izuku slipped the backpack on again. No. When he heard her answer, he mulled over their options. We've probably already burned a minute or two standing on this rooftop. Any longer and we risk running into Mr. Aizawa with barely any time left on the clock. At this point, fighting may not be our best option. Ugh, but I doubt he'll simply let us escape without issue. Knowing they were halfway across the training site, Izuku was confident that he could get them to the exit, but that's only if Mr. Aizawa didn't use his quirk. What about the gate? Do you see it? Izuku inquired. Oh, I've found it, Yaoyorozu confirmed before lowering the binoculars and turning toward him. It's roughly a straight shot from here if we get a move on. Rising to his feet, he walked over and stood next to Yaoyorozu. I can faintly make it out, he noted, furrowing his brows as he saw the sign with the word, exit, on top of it. I can get us there, Izuku stated confidently, turning toward her. Several months ago, the One for All user would have been hesitant to make such a bold claim to one of his classmates, but after everything he's experienced, things were different now. The fighting that took place at the USJ to encountering a villain like Stain changed him. For the better, he told himself. It was time to take that step that All Might always wanted from him. Announce yourself as the new symbol of peace. As for his partner, Izuku saw the way she regarded him, not saying a word for several moments. Those onyx-colored eyes of hers stared into his emerald ones, as if they were trying to confirm whether he could back his claim. After a few more agonizing seconds, her cautious expression disappeared, being replaced with a more supportive smile. Then let's get moving, partner. All right. He may be confident about passing the practical portion, but carrying Yaoyorozu in his arms was still a difficult hill for him to fully climb over. However, swallowing his embarrassment on the matter, Izuku hoisted Yaoyorozu off the ground in a princess-style carry. Taking a moment to close his eyes, he could feel One for All surge throughout his body, producing the green electricity that danced around his body. You ready? Izuku asked, looking at his classmate. Yaoyorozu nodded. With that silent confirmation, Izuku hopped over the edge and rapidly made his way down the side of the building. Along the way, he felt Yaoyorozu's arm tighten its grip around his neck and shutting her eyes. Not a fan of heights, it seems, he thought, finding her expression a bit cute. He silently chided himself. What am I thinking? Izuku promptly shook his head before focusing on the task at hand. He tried his best to make the journey down as smooth as possible, but it was difficult, as there were a few close calls with the air conditioning units sticking out from the windows and Izuku landing on a ledge with a bit more force than necessary. Cracking noises were rarely a good thing. When are they ever a good thing? Izuku mentally questioned. That said, the situation calmed down when his feet made contact with the sidewalk. Though Izuku knew he couldn't afford to slow down. How are we doing for time? Yaoyorozu uncurled one of her arms from Izuku's neck and glanced at the ticking timer. We have just about 7 minutes until our window's closed, she informed him. But Izuku hadn't missed the way her eyes scanned their immediate vicinity. I imagine Mr. Aizawa is holding out near the exit. It would make the most sense based on us being his opponents. You're right, Izuku agreed, seeing the logic behind her words. It makes the most sense for someone with his kind of experience as an underground hero. And what do you know of our teacher? Searching his brain for any relevant information on their teacher, Izuku revealed what he knew to Yaoyorozu. He prefers to ambush his opponents in tight spaces. But Izuku remembers what Mr. Aizawa said to him during the USJ incident about how heroes can't be a one-trick pony. We need to be careful as we get closer to the gate, especially from above. From what I've found out about him, he likes to use his scarf to move around in a hurry, helping keep his opponents disoriented. And that's not even mentioning his goggles, he added at the end, recalling his teacher's fight during the USJ incident and how effective the item was in keeping the villains guessing. Then why don't we lay a trap for him? Yaoyorozu suggested. What do you have in mind? Well, 10. Stepping inside the air-conditioned lobby of the training facility, Shoto lightly grimaced as he massaged his still aching shoulder from the encounter with all might. Despite his relatively calm disposition, it hid the frustration boiling underneath. I knew our chances weren't great, but DMN it. He couldn't help but click his teeth at how terribly he and his partner performed. That's when he heard the doors swing open behind him. Move it, icy hot Bisudi. And speaking of the devil, Shoto thought, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath to calm down, then looked over his shoulder to see the explosive hothead of their class stomping his way forward. Briefly, Shoto contemplated moving out of the way and giving himself less of a headache to deal with later. Yet a single look at Bakugo's angry scowl made Shoto change his mind. No. Bakugo, who purposely bumped his shoulder into him, stopped less than a foot away with his back to Shoto. A second later, the hothead turned on the ball of his heel with a murderous expression. What did you say? He yelled, which hadn't gone unnoticed by several classmates nearby. No, Shoto replied firmly, taking a step forward. His hands balled into fists. You don't get to pretend that you're able to order me around like Midoriya. Not after the way you screwed around out there and got us a failing grade, Shoto stated, standing his ground. It's not my fault you can't keep up. Shoto scoffed at Bakugo's ridiculous claim. If you think that's the reason why we failed, I'm going to give you a single piece of advice. Get over yourself. Maybe it was too soon for him to throw those words at Bakugo, but Shoto never went out of his way to purposely antagonize his classmates or belittle them in the manner he did. It's one of the reasons why he owes Midoriya big time. He showed him a better path. Oh yeah, Bakugo said, jabbing a finger into Shoto's chest. Let me tell you something, I could blow you out of this building right now, and you couldn't do a DMN thing about it. If there's anyone who should get over themselves, it's you. I don't hide my strength the way you did. I want all these side characters to know who'll be the new number one. The blonde's voice got lower. And who will be stronger than All Might ever was. You can count on that, icy hot BS. With that final claim, Shoto watched his classmate turn away from him and skulked away. Prick, he muttered, narrowing his eyes at the blonde's retreating form. Geez, what crawled up his butt and died? Out of the corner of his eye, Shoto noticed someone approaching him. Turning to his right, Shoto saw the purple-haired girl, Jiro, who had originally been standing a good distance away, finally found the courage to walk up to him while shooting Bakugo's backside with a weary look. I'm not sure, Shoto answered, shaking his head as he calmed down. I assume you heard all that? He asked, curiosity lacing his words. Jiro shrugged. I heard most of it. Not that you need my kind of quirk to figure out what the explosive Pomeranian said to you just now, she casually admitted while twirling one of her jacks. Sorry about that if it bugs you. I didn't intend on listening, but it's all right. You sure? Shoto nodded. Believe me, you would know if it upset me. Realizing how he framed his response, Shoto closed his eyes and sighed heavily. I'm sorry about that. I'm still getting used to the whole. Jiro raised a brow. Socializing. Yes. The girl snorted at him. Dude, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you might be worse than Midoriya in some ways, she stated bluntly with a slight teasing smirk. Am I? His follow-up question made Jiro pause for a moment as she stared at him. She blinked several times, seemingly unsure of how to answer the question. I mean, I mostly go off of what Ochako's told me about the guy. Apparently, he used to stutter a lot and struggled to look people in the eye. This time, it was Shoto's turn to snort at her words. Is that so? He asked. Memories of their battle in the sports festival and their deadly encounter with Stain came rushing back to the half-hot, half-cold quirk user. For a long time, he used to think Midoriya was a timid wallflower based on his behavior. No, he's just a crazy guy with the heart and pain tolerance of a hero. While he revisited those particular moments, Shoto's eye did catch something. You all right? Shoto gestured to her ear, which had a bandage over it. I assume you got that during your match with one of the teachers, he said. Oh, this? A look of realization formed, followed by her lightly nodding. Yeah, no, I did get scuffed up a bit during the fight with Present Mike. She shook her head. I'm lucky I had a partner in Coda to cover for me because of his quirk. I definitely couldn't beat him alone. But I'm okay. Thanks for asking. So, you want to go see how the others are doing? Sure. Making their way over to the other side of the lobby, they approached the wall of screens, showcasing the current matches unfolding between their classmates and teachers. Two, in particular, stood out to Shoto. Of course, one of them was Midoriya's matchup against Mr. Aizawa. Though he did blink once, somewhat surprised by the scene playing out before him. The same can be said for Jiro as the purple-haired girl whistled. Would you look at that? She asked humorously. The scene unfolding involved Midoriya, green lightning dancing around his body, running at a dizzying speed with a yellow backpack, but it was the sight of Yaoyorozu in his arms that made him do a double take. First, he has the gall to take on Stain, potentially by himself if I hadn't arrived, and now finds the courage to carry a girl in his arms? Shoto questioned. At this point, his opinion of Midoriya proved to be more and more correct. But I gotta give it to the guy, Jiro continued, arms loosely crossed on top of the railing with a smirk. If you told me we'd see Midoriya carry around Yamamo in his arms, I would've said they're nuts. Furrowing his eyebrows, Shoto voiced his thoughts on the matter. Why? He questioned. Midoriya's quite physically capable of accomplishing a task as simple as carrying Yaoyorozu. Ie? Shoto heard Jiro's reaction. Turning toward his classmate, he saw the slightly confused expression on her face. Did I say something? No, Jiro replied quickly, scratching her cheek for whatever reason with a soft hint of red on it. She proceeded to clear her throat, then continued. I've heard Midoriya's a strong guy. I wasn't talking about him way. I see. My apologies for misunderstanding. Dude, it's fine, Jiro told him in a more relaxed tone, the red slowly fading from her face. You don't gotta apologize or anything. But, I'd warn you from telling Mina or Toru about him carrying Yamamo like that. She gestured to the screen of Midoriya and Yaoyorozu running through a more industrialized part of their exam site. Or they will bug those two relentlessly. Shoto considered her words, then nodded. Thanks, Jiro said, shooting him a grateful look. I appreciate that, Todoroki. Glancing back at the screen of interest, Shoto took a closer look at his classmates, noticing the serious expression on Midoriya's face, followed by him nodding at whatever Yaoyorozu must have said. The really are a scary combination when Midoriya flips that switch, Shoto concluded in that moment. You think they'll beat Mr. Aizawa? Jiro asked him. I do. You think so? On paper, they'd make for a formidable duo, Shoto acknowledged, keeping an eye on the screen. I'd hate to be their opponents. I've already seen what Midoriya can do with his speed, power, and... The fight against Stain popped into his head. Quick decision-making already. When you combine that with Yaoyorozu's versatility and intelligence, It makes any fight against them a serious challenge. Dang, Jiro muttered, eyes wide. That's some high praise. Shoto did pour some cold water. It's only an observation, he clarified. After all, there's always the chance they screw up during the exam or fail to take something into consideration. As he finished giving his thoughts on their match, something grabbed his attention. Several screens away, he saw a familiar face and costume. Uraraka? He murmured, seeing the brunette currently fighting for her life as she was desperately clinging onto a railing with Aoyama right by her side. Oh, crap, that doesn't look good, Jiro commented. Shoto narrowed his eyes. No, it doesn't. 10. When their surroundings began to shift from the glistening skyscrapers to a more industrialized part of the training site, Momo's self-doubt began to rise with every step taken by Midoriya. Her onyx-colored eyes were constantly scanning the space above them, searching for any signs of their homeroom teacher. She knew the exit was coming up fast by her classmates' pace. And Mr. Aizawa likely knows we're close, Momo suspected. Her anxiousness about the situation was starting to rise, and it was noticeable to Midoriya. Yaoyorozu. H-ha. Turning her attention back to her partner, Momo saw the concern behind his eyes. Did I hear what I said? He asked, furrowing his brows. My apologies, I was. It's okay. Can you? Momo bit the inside of her cheek as her voice trailed off, then looked at Midoriya. Can you repeat what you said? She asked. Midoriya nodded, his expression turning serious. I said you need to be ready for when I slow down. We're nearing the exit, and I think you were right to believe Mr. Aizawa wasn't going to waste his time chasing us around. Plus, she saw his lip turn into a thin line. I have a feeling he's watching us as we speak. How confident are you in that feeling? Pretty confident, Midoriya answered. She expected their teacher to prefer ambushing them near the exit. It made the most sense based on his personality, exhausted appearance, and the information provided by Midoriya. But will I be able to come through for Midoriya when the time comes? It's a question that's been nagging at her relentlessly as she tries to calm her heart rate down. Then you know what do if. We won't need it, Midoriya interrupted her, a move that caught her by surprise, but it was the intensity behind his eyes that truly left her stunned. We'll make it, Yaoyorozu. Whatever she wanted to say to him, Momo's thoughts would be put on hold as Midoriya, who had been blazing across the gravel road, began to slow down rapidly, kicking up a small storm of rock fragments behind him. Momo, without hesitation, tightened her grip on Midoriya, knowing what it meant for him to suddenly pump the brakes on his speed. Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya's attempts to slow down paid off because moments later, Momo saw the green lightning, usually dancing across her classmate's body, suddenly vanish as he came to a full stop. Their eyes met for a second. Go! Despite whatever self-doubts she possessed about her abilities, Momo didn't hesitate in doing her part as she gave a brief nod at Midoriya, then darted into the nearest alleyway after he put her down. She looked back at him over her shoulder, seeing Midoriya rushing to pull the smoke canisters he carried around in his tactical pouches and ripping the pin off them. In seconds, colored smoke erupted from the top of the cylinders, spilling into the air. And that was the last thing she saw before turning the corner. It was up to her to take out Mr. Aizawa when Midoriya created the opportunity to do so. 10. Gritting his teeth, Izuku tossed the smoke canisters around him with the hope of obscuring his teacher's vision long enough for him to activate One for All. A cloud of colored smoke formed. Reaching inside, Izuku felt that familiar sensation of power rippling through his body, green lightning dancing across his skin once more. Now, he needed to keep Mr. Aizawa focused on him. Izuku eventually heard the smoke canisters beginning to sputter, a sign that he needed to get moving or risk being caught in his teacher's line of sight. Peering through the colored cloud, Izuku saw the wall of what he suspected to be a factory or warehouse. That'll have to do, he muttered. Without giving it another thought, Izuku took off in an incredible burst of speed. He quickly closed the distance and ped his fist back. Smash! He yelled, letting his arm fly forward with a strike that tore open the wall, sending chunks of brick flying everywhere. Time seemingly slowed down Izuku as he thought of his next move. The inside of the facility was vast, with a wide open floor plan, exposed beams crisscrossing above him, and stacks of steel everywhere. That's when his eye caught the door on the other side with the word, "Exit," above it. There. A few seconds later, Izuku tucked in his knees as he rolled across the concrete floor. He traveled a few meters until he slowed down enough for him to find his way back onto his feet quickly, running for the door on the other side of the facility. Okay, that should have caught his attention, but will Mr. Aizawa take the bait? When he reached the door, Izuku decided to try something he once saw. "This better work like it does in the movies," he murmured. Izuku, traveling faster than most Olympic athletes dreamed of achieving, leaned in with his shoulder as he approached the exit. Before he could think about chickening out, Izuku's shoulder slammed into the metal door with force. Immediately, it was knocked off its hinges and sent flying into a nearby wall. As for Izuku, he stumbled a few times before managing to find his footing. It was only after steadying himself that he realized he ended up in an alleyway. "Okay, gotta keep moving," he reminded himself, breaking out into a run. While doing so, he moved the backpack around to lay against his chest as he reached inside and took out more smoke canisters. Even one of the flashbangs Yaoyorozu made for him. Flipping the backpack around to make running easier, Izuku jumped toward the brick wall, pushed off, and propelled himself into the air. He continued the same motion, bouncing between the walls while he kept an eye out for Mr. Aizawa. Eventually, after gaining enough momentum, Izuku propelled himself into the air, high enough to be above the roofs of the surrounding factories. During that hang time, Izuku's eyes slowly widened as one of the smoke towers several dozen meters to his right caught his attention for one very specific reason. Mr. Aizawa. Standing on top of said structure, his homeroom teacher was directly looking at him, goggles covering his eyes. But One for All still active? Izuku hadn't felt the loss of power, though he did realize why after taking a second to look down. Right, it's an exam. He wouldn't do that, right? His question would have to wait. Gravity took hold of his body, dragging him back to the ground. Izuku knew he didn't have time. The second he hit the ground, Mr. Aizawa would be all over him. I need to block his vision. Reaching into his pouches, Izuku pulled out a pair of smoke grenades. Ripping the pins off them, he tossed them as hard as possible at where he was aiming to land. Smoke trailed the canisters, hurtling for the rooftop below. Seeing the cloud of colored smoke forming, Izuku glanced at the buildings lining the other side of the gravel road, where he saw Yaoyorozu. While he couldn't make the exact details, he did spot the item she was carrying. Go, Yaoyorozu. You got this. 10. Momo knew she only had one chance at hitting their teacher. With every step she took forward across the flat rooftop, lined with air conditioning units and enormous fans, Momo felt the stress building up inside as she jumped over the short gap between the neighboring buildings. Though she did stumble briefly, a result of her paying too much attention to Midoriya. She slowed down temporarily, but resumed her pace after securing her footing. It was during that brief amount of time that she saw the cloud of smoke forming on the opposite rooftop, followed by a ball of green lightning landing within it. If he's using the items I made him, that means Mr. Aizawa's nearby, Momo realized, gripping the bow she made tighter than before. Coming to a sliding stop, Momo tried her best to scan Midoriya's side for any sign of their teacher. The search took a bit longer than she wanted, but Momo's eyes caught the shape of a human leaping off a smoke tower. For a moment, she essayed in air, unsure of whether or not her teacher knew he was doing, but those concerns evaporated after seeing him use one of the tentacles of his capture weapon. He launched it at a nearby pipe, but disappeared from her sight temporarily until she saw him swing onto the same rooftop as Midoriya. This was it. Using her quirk and knowledge, a bulge formed around Momo's arm before bursting open, revealing a cylinder-like shape attached to an arrow. Taking it out from her forearm, Momo carefully handled the ammunition and pressed a button on the side of it, making a small green light pop up. She proceeded to knock the arrow, then aimed at the opposing rooftop. From her spot, Momo watched several more canisters tossed from the cloud of smoke. While most did their job of releasing more colored smoke to limit Mr. Aizawa's vision, one went off differently. Bang! Momo saw several bright flashes erupt from within the smoke. Falling back on her lessons from over the years, she drew back the string and aimed the bow slightly upwards, hoping to minimize the chance of her arrow falling short. On the other side, she saw the blur of green lightning moving all throughout the cloud of smoke, a sign of Midoriya engaging their teacher. Delaware smash. There! She shouted internally. Someone came flying out of the red smoke, rolling across the rooftop for a few meters until they hit the side of an air conditioning unit hard. It was Mr. Aizawa. Pulling back further on the composite bow she made, a far cry from her personal one at home, Momo aimed at her teacher. She knew this was going to hurt him, but glancing at the watch on her wrist, time was dwindling for them as they were under the 3-minute mark. Enough time for us to capture him, but... We'll make it, Yaoyorozu. Midoriya's words came back with a silent but powerful fury. If her teammate was willing to have that much faith in her plan, especially someone like Midoriya, she couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. I can't fail. Not again, she told herself with a determined expression. Aiming at her teacher roughly a dozen meters away, Momo took a deep breath before uncurling her fingers, holding onto the string and letting the specially made arrow fly through the air. The moment it went airborne, she watched it cut through the air for what felt like an eternity until the arrowhead, as it was depicted in that comic, broke apart. That's where the true payload came out, a set of prongs attached to a small taser. Just enough to give Midoriya an opening. Momo waited with bated breath, seeing the distance rapidly close between it and Mr. Aizawa. A smile nearly threatened to break out on her face. Yet that smile never appeared. It was stomped out when she saw her teacher dodge out of the arrow's face and let it slam into the side of a ventilation unit. A moment later, Mr. Aizawa's head turned her way, his goggles obscuring his eyes. Despite not being able to see whether or not his quirk was activated, there was something more to his gaze that caused her distress. Is he disappointed? Swallowing her saliva, Momo felt that lump in her throat and her heart rate soar. Fear gripped her body like it was a constrictor. When she tried to create another arrow, this time with a blunted edge, Momo lost her nerve and popped out several of them. All of them hit the rooftop and scattered. Releasing the mistake she made, Momo turned back to the rooftop where another battle ensued between Midoriya and Mr. Aizawa. No, she whispered, unable to look away from Mr. Aizawa. Her surroundings began to change. She was no longer standing on the rooftop of the exam site. Instead, Momo was right back where it all began, the sports festival. An opportunity to show off her abilities. A chance she squandered from the beginning. From the class pervert using her to achieve victory, playing second fiddle during the cavalry battle, and most of all, the match against Tokoyami. Momo. When she heard her name called, Momo looked up. From her trembling hands to find Midoriya halfway across the gap between the two buildings. She barely had a chance to react when he landed next to her, throwing up a bit of dust, before he grabbed her and jumped down into the alleyway below them. Right as they went over the edge, Momo saw Mr. Aizawa head for the exit. 10. How much time do we have left? Izuku was doing his best to navigate the alleyway, leaping over dumpsters, fences, and crates while he carried Yaoyorozu in his arms. Though Izuku would be lying if he said he wasn't concerned when she gave him no answer or any indication she heard him. Glancing at her, Izuku saw his classmate's hands trembling as she looked almost out of it. Yaoyorozu? Hey, he gently called out to her, even lightly shaking Yaoyorozu. It had little effect on her, forcing Izuku to find another way. That's when he remembered her reaction to him using her given name. Should I really be using her name so casually? He questioned, unable to deny the feeling of embarrassment at addressing a pretty girl in such a manner. But the reality of their situation made him shove those feelings away for the time being. I'll apologize later, Yaoyorozu. Taking a deep breath, Izuku gathered the courage to call out to her. And Momo. To his joy and slight embarrassment, the girl in his arms reacted to the usage of her name. Blinking a few times, Yaoyorozu finally looked up at him. A hint of red on her cheeks. Did you? I did, Izuku answered quickly. And I am very, very sorry for doing that. I didn't know how else to grab your attention with everything going on. Yaoyorozu's face turned bitter. I'm sorry, she muttered, refusing to look him in the eye. If it wasn't for my terrible aim, I might have been able to hit Mr. Aizawa. What? You heard what I said, Yaoyorozu repeated, her voice taking on a harsh tone. She visibly bit her lower lip, frustration taking over in that moment. I couldn't hit Mr. Aizawa. He saw her grit her teeth. And now, there's a chance we'll fail. All because of me. We haven't failed yet, Momo. But Izuku cut her off. But nothing, he said sharply, earning a surprised reaction from her. We haven't run out of time or been captured by Mr. Aizawa. There's a chance for us to pass either way. You hear that? We can still win this. How can you be so? Because. Izuku smiled as he remembered something All Might once said. A lesson Izuku wanted to take to heart. A hero can always break out of a tough spot, he told her. That's what we do. We make the impossible possible, and I can't think someone who can embody that spirit more than you, Creati. She looked almost taken aback by his mention of her hero name. Yet Izuku saw the glint of doubt in her eyes. A feeling he was all too familiar with since receiving One for All. Let's beat Mr. Aizawa, Izuku stated defiantly. Show him what a hero like you can do. For several agonizing moments, it seemed his words hadn't gotten through to her. Izuku watched as her eyes, still carrying that nugget of doubt, sharpened into a firmer expression, followed by nodding. It was a start. Izuku knew whatever demons or troubles she was facing wouldn't go away after today. He was living proof of that, but he hoped this would be her start. Turning his attention away from Yaoyorozu, Izuku saw the end of the alleyway quickly approaching. It meant they'd be forced to face off against Mr. Aizawa one last time. 2 minutes, Yaoyorozu informed him. Izuku, for whatever reason, didn't feel troubled by their dwindling time. In fact, he felt confident about their chances of defeating their homeroom teacher. This time, Izuku thought, it'll be different. Approaching the end of the alleyway, Izuku leapt over the wired fence blocking the entrance. He bent his knees slightly, preparing for the impact against the gravel road. Rock fragments were thrown up as he slowed down, but that's not what grabbed his attention. Slowly, as if time came to a crawl, Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of a familiar face kneeling atop a street light. Crap, he whispered. The power of One for All began to fade, eventually rendering him powerless while under the gaze of his teacher. Unfortunately, Izuku lost his footing in the process and fell with Yaoyorozu. Naturally, he reacted by wrapping his arms around Yaoyorozu, using his body to shield her. Though it did mean parts of his costume got torn up in the process. They only stopped when his back hit the wall of the training site, including the back of his head. Ow! Izuku! Izuku blinked a few times, seeing Yaoyorozu's face marred with concern. But, grimacing lightly at the pain from hitting what was probably solid metal, Izuku managed to give her a thumbs up. I'm fine. Just a little banged up, he said. His eyes widened. Look out! Without giving it another thought, Izuku rose to his feet despite his dazed state and shoved Yaoyorozu out of the way, leading to him being caught in Mr. Aizawa's capture weapon. The result was him hitting the metal wall while wrapped up in the cloth. Gritting his teeth, Izuku tried activating One for All, but knew he was under the effects of the man's quirk. Next to him, Yaoyorozu looked unsure of what to do next. All she could manage to create was a bow to replace the one she lost earlier. Come on, Izuku thought, trying to think of anything to help them out of this situation. In the back of his mind, Izuku knew time was running out. He'd be amazed if they had more than a minute. What can I do? I need a second. I need to stay out of his vision. I need to hide, but how? The final smoke canister in his pouch was impossible to reach. They were out of options. I just need. Closing his eyes momentarily, Izuku dug deep into the quirk gifted to him, searching for that familiar surge of power he's come to know these past few months. Intimately, in fact. Most of all, he tried to force out that feeling from the day of the sports festival. The day he saw those phantoms. The previous wielders of this all-powerful quirk. Help me. Like you did during the festival. Izuku glanced over at his teammate, Yaoyorozu, whose eyes were locked on Mr. Aizawa. Despite how slow everything felt in the moment, He saw that flicker of doubt growing stronger by the second in her eyes. For her, he mentally stated into the void. "Do you mean it? If you won't do it for me, then at least do it for her. Help Momo." Throughout his entire life, all Izuku ever wanted was to follow in the footsteps of his idol. He wanted to be there when someone needed help, to save them with a smile and let them know everything would be okay. As he was about to yell at Yaoyorozu, telling her to escape, he heard something. "How are you feeling, young Midoriya?" Izuku, who had been hanging his head the moment he sat down on the edge of the bed, sighed when he heard All Might's question. He glanced up at his mentor, currently in his real form. "I'm fine," he said to the number one hero with his hands folded together. "I'm just..." Izuku closed his eyes before lightly shaking his head. "I don't know what happened out there. I thought I was getting the hang of..." "Hey, none of that," All Might stated sharply, interrupting him. "But His retort was prevented when he felt someone lightly karate chop him on the head. "Kid," All Might said, even going as far as to place his hands on Izuku's shoulders. "You have made staggering progress in the last few weeks. No one can take that from you. This is another wrinkle, okay? And we'll figure it out together." But All Might's voice took on a guilty tone. "It's the least I can do to make up for my rather, lackluster performance as your mentor." "That's not true," Izuku weakly countered. "You don't have to lie. I know when I've screwed up." The hero's guilty visage did carry a smidge of fear in it. "And, mostly because Gran Torino showed up to my house and beat me to a bloody pulp while chiding me about how bad of a job I've done teaching you." "He did?" All Might stood back up, rubbing the back of his neck. "He sure did, but getting beaten by that old man is the least of my concerns right now, especially after what you went through today." "Do we have to talk about it?" Izuku asked, uncertainty lacing his words. "We do," All Might sadly confirmed. Izuku sighed deeply, knowing it was pointless to put off the inevitable conversation. Though someone did pop up in his mind. Yaoyorozu, the dark-haired beauty of their class. He can still remember the shock on her face when she ran up to him, asking what was going on. While he was informed by their homeroom teacher that they cut the feed, Izuku had a feeling some of his classmates saw it. Raising his arm in front of him, Izuku closed his eyes and, to the best of his ability, tried to dig deep for whatever it was that triggered the incident earlier today. What made it happen? He mentally questioned. Searching his memories, Izuku recalled a particular detail about what led up to the incident. He wanted to allow Yaoyorozu to strike Mr. Aizawa. "I wanted to hide us from view," Izuku realized, brows furrowing as he attempted to summon that feeling once more. His body slowly lit up with the surge of power he's come to know, except he began to dig deeper into the quirk itself. Almost as if he was trying to see past a thick forest for what lay beyond. Izuku began to grit his teeth, already reaching the limits of what he was capable of achieving. "I can't stop here." For the first time since the sports festival, Izuku pushed past those restrictions he placed on himself. Every step he took forward was met with a mind-numbing pain. His body continued to come under an immense level of stress from his bones, muscles, and down to his cells, enduring the additional flood of power surging through him. The green lightning responds to these levels, as if it were a living being, pulsating with every ounce of power being utilized. 6. The lightning's green coloration began to darken, turning nearly black at certain intervals. Once he grew comfortable with the pressure being put on him, Izuku opened the metaphorical valve slightly more. S7. Izuku nearly gasped at the sensation. It feels like someone put my bones in a hydraulic press." It was the closest way to describe his feelings, even forcing him to bite down on his collar. Despite the pain, however, Izuku wanted to keep going. For whatever reason, he focused in on the nearby door. Something was telling. "No, it's guiding me to a door," Izuku suspected. Pushing onward, Izuku turned the valve slightly more. If the sensation of bones rattling under the force of a hydraulic press was terrible, nothing could describe what happened next. 8. This was it. Izuku knew any steps he took forward would result in shattered bones and torn ligaments. Yet the door in his mind was so close, but still so far away. The temptation to take another step was irresistible, but he couldn't risk it. Young Midoriya? Finding the strength to look up at All Might, worry was etched into the man's face. Izuku even noticed the slight trail of blood coming from his mentor's mouth. Every movement he made took considerable effort, but Izuku powered through it. He gave All Might a smile, the best he could manage in the moment, to show him he was okay. Fine, Izuku said through his teeth, even managing to give him a thumbs up like he showed Yaoyorozu during the test. Are you? All Might swallowed nervously. Are you sure, young man? I am. Izuku appreciated the question. However, he'd go rigid in the moment after latching onto that sensation he felt during the exam. What is this? Izuku's eyes began to widen, feeling an immense pressure rushing to the arm he held up, and that's when it happened. Purple smoke began to seep through every pore in his arm. A sight that left the two wielders shocked by what they were seeing, especially Izuku. How? I don't know. The smoke continued to seep from his arm, escaping through his sleeve. A million thoughts came to Izuku about what this could mean. Out of every single one, Izuku knew this wasn't the overwhelming power stored up by One for All. This is different. It's like... He furrowed his brows. It's like I'm some sort of pressure cooker, or, maybe a fog machine? Whatever the case, Izuku did know one thing. This was a new quirk. And people saw it, he said aloud before consciously sliding the lid back on the smoke to prevent it from escaping. It took considerable effort on his part, but once the flow of smoke ceased, Izuku looked up at his mentor at a loss for what to do next. People saw it, All Might, Izuku repeated quietly, placing his hands on his knees. Midoriya, calm down. All Might's words were followed by the man sitting down next to Izuku on the bed, even placing a hand on his shoulder. It's going to be fine, you hear me? But nothing, the man said, cutting him off. We'll figure this out. Together. You hear that? Izuku heard the conviction behind his mentor's words. For a moment, the ninth wielder was left unsure of what to say or how to respond. Though he wouldn't get a chance because the door to the nurse's office, without warning, suddenly swung open violently, making Izuku and All Might jump. Standing at the threshold of the room was Mr. Aizawa. No one said a word for what felt like an eternity. You. Izuku saw Mr. Aizawa look directly at All Might, eyes glowing red, along with his hair floating, while pointing at said hero. Come with me, and this isn't a request. But, Mr. Aizawa made his way inside the nurse's office, but not before slamming the door shut to keep anyone from seeing All Might's true form. Each step his homeroom teacher took made Izuku's anxiety reach new levels until Mr. Aizawa stood directly in front of All Might. And you? Izuku jumped when the underground hero turned his way, eyes still glowing red. However, unlike the livid look he was giving All Might, Mr. Aizawa's expression somewhat softened. How are you feeling? The man asked, easing back on using his quirk. I'm fine. You sure? Izuku nodded. I'm just. Right, Mr. Aizawa said, choosing not to ask him any further questions. That said, his attention turned to All Might once more, his softened-up expression hardening. You and I are going to be meeting with the principal. And this isn't a request, you oaf. That part grabbed Izuku's attention. Why are you going to meet with the principal? Izuku asked, a flicker of fear in his voice. While his teacher never looked back at him, Izuku did see his face twitch for a moment, then sighed at the question. Midoriya, I'm not going to ignore what happened. I am glad, despite the incident, that you and Yaoyorozu were able to take advantage of the chaos to capture me, but that doesn't mean I, as a teacher, can brush it aside. Do you understand? His voice remained that same haggard tone as usual, but there was more to it. Izuku opened his mouth, ready to respond, when All Might lightly squeezed his shoulder. It's all right, Midoriya, the hero told him, prompting Izuku to turn toward his mentor. You said, I know what I told you, All Might said. But this. For the first time, Izuku saw the man genuinely look his age, letting out an exhausted sigh. I think this might be a bit out of my league, kid. Midoriya. Hearing his name called, Izuku looked away from All Might to Mr. Aizawa. Why yes. I promise nothing will happen to All Might, the teacher said, hands in his pocket. It's just a much-needed conversation that has to unfold, especially given what's happened recently involving you. Izuku saw Mr. Aizawa give his mentor a side-eye look. And I have a feeling this oaf knows more than he's letting on. The same goes for you, but I'd rather hear from All Might first, then bring you into the fold when I have a better idea of what's going on. Mr. Aizawa's reasoning made sense. A lot, actually. Izuku hung his head, choosing to look at the tiled floor of Recovery Girl's office. He felt All Might pat him on the shoulder a few times before getting up. That was when Izuku slowly lifted his head, seeing his mentor and Mr. Aizawa head for the door. The two men stopped momentarily, allowing All Might to take on his muscled form. By the way, Midoriya? The sound of his homeroom teacher's voice made Izuku look at him, where he was greeted by familiar faces standing on the other side of the open door. It seems you've made a few of your classmates worried. With that, Mr. Aizawa and All Might walked out of the nurse's office, leaving the door open. Izuku was like a deer caught in headlights, unsure of what to say to his classmates poking their heads inside. Hi. 10. Midoriya. Deku. Staying a few paces behind her classmates, Momo witnessed Ochako and, despite his adherence to the rules, Ida rush inside Recovery Girl's office to check on him. Their green-haired friend, still in his hero costume, seemed caught off guard by the sudden mention of his name and the speedy arrival of said classmates. However, they weren't alone. Todoroki, of all people in their class, moved faster than she originally anticipated. It's a sight that left Momo stunned for a moment, and she wasn't alone in thinking it was out of the ordinary for the usually stoic dual-quirk user. Kyoka cursed, a hint of astonishment behind her tone. She walked alongside Momo, twirling her earjack casually. I think that's the closest thing I've seen to Todoroki being concerned about any of us. Man, Midoriya must have really knocked some sense into him. Kyoka! Momo hissed quietly, nearly gasping at her friend's comment. What? You know it's true. Momo looked at her in disbelief. That doesn't mean you should make such crude remarks so loudly, the heiress replied, occasionally glancing at the others to see if any of them heard her friend. Fine, Mom. Did you just really pull the mom card on me? Sure did, Kyoka answered with a smirk. Momo stared at her friend for several moments before sighing. You know what? Not even worth it. I'll let that slide for today, she said, turning her attention away from Kyoka to Midoriya and the others. From where she stood, Momo noticed Ochako sitting on Midoriya's left. The brunette even reached out and put a hand on his forearm, a sight that didn't sit well with Momo for whatever reason. Meanwhile, Ida and Todoroki sat across from them on the other bed. How are you feeling, Deku? Ochako asked. I'm better, Midoriya replied, smiling at the brunette. He turned away briefly and looked at everyone, including her and Kyoka. A lot better, and I'm happy you guys came to see me. Ida added his thoughts. That's a relief to hear, Midoriya. It didn't help that most of the teachers seemed almost clueless about your situation, Todoroki said in a manner befitting of him. Todoroki, Ida called out. You shouldn't say such things about school faculty. I'm certain that if they possessed knowledge of Midoriya's situation, they would inform us of our classmate's status. Yeah. The interaction between the two did get a chuckle out of everyone, including Momo. She's gotten used to Ida's rather odd combination of being an enthusiastic ruler follower. With exceptions, of course. Still, Deku, I know this may be a little too early to ask you, but... Ochako's voice grabbed the attention of everyone, realizing what she was about to do. What happened out there? I mean, it was so fast. You and Yamamoto were on the verge of being captured by Mr. Aizawa, then. A cloud of purple smoke covered part of the entire training site, Todoroki finished, knitting his brows together. I've never seen you do anything like that. Not even. I know, Midoriya replied quietly, likely understanding what Todoroki was alluding to. And, to be honest with you guys, I don't really know, he admitted to them. I've got a few ideas, but nothing concrete. It's just... Midoriya's voice trailed off. Ida stepped in. No need to force yourself, the class president told him. I imagine you want answers as badly as we do. Still, I don't want you to think you have to figure it out on your own. I believe I'm not speaking out of turn when I say all of us in here would help if you asked us. Midoriya stared at the speedster. Really? Of course, Ida replied. She saw him glance around the room, almost as if he was struggling to believe what Ida said. Ochako gave Midoriya a reassuring smile, Todoroki gave a subtle nod, and even Kyoka didn't oppose the idea. When his eyes landed on her, Momo froze up for a moment. That's when she felt a hand on the small of her back, followed by said hand lightly pushing her forward until she was standing right by the bed Midoriya was sitting on. Briefly, Momo looked over shoulder at Kyoka, seeing the culprit fake whistling while looking up at the ceiling. Yaoyorozu! Hearing her name, she turned her head around and looked back at Midoriya, who tilted his head to the side in slight confusion. Cute. That out-of-pocket thought made Momo freeze up. Are you all right, Yaoyorozu? Ida asked, adjusting his glasses. I am, she replied hurriedly, trying to mask her embarrassment from the internal comment she made about Midoriya. Clearing her throat, Momo tried to regain her composure. I'm glad to see you in good health. The entire incident was rather... Memories of the exam flashed back in her mind when the entire area was engulfed in smoke. It must have been a scary moment for you. Midoriya's response left her and the others stunned. I was more scared for you and Mr. Aizawa than anything else, he stated, scratching his cheek with a gloved finger. The idea of you two potentially getting hurt because of me. That wouldn't have sat well with me. It was probably a chaotic mess, and there was the chance something could have happened. Momo struggled to find the right words to describe what she was feeling. Her brows stitched themselves together, showing off her confusion. Ida and Ochako gave their friend concerned looks. Midoriya? Deku? There was an exception among them. Todoroki, who hadn't said much to Midoriya, decided now was the time to speak. What did it feel like? He asked Midoriya. When you released that smoke, Todoroki clarified. How did it feel? Midoriya contemplated the dual quirk user's question, adopting a thinking pose. If I had to describe it, I would say it felt like I was a pressure cooker and opened the lid without thinking about the amount of steam that might come out, he explained to them. Though his expression did turn somber, lifting his arm. Not that it would have mattered, Midoriya said. I guess there's more to my quirk than I would have guessed. Maybe it's your quirk's way of dealing with all that excess power, Momo suddenly suggested. Her comment gained the attention of everyone, especially Midoriya. You think so? Kyoka asked skeptically, raising an eyebrow. When she heard her friend's question, Momo blinked a few times after realizing she said it aloud. It took a few moments to process what happened before her cheeks turned bright red. Oh yeah, Momo said, trying to roll with it. While I'm not completely familiar with Midoriya's quirk, it could be a way of venting excess energy that may have built up. Midoriya did hurt himself rather often and... Thinking back to early days at school, the sports festival, and USJ, Momo realized how much she disliked seeing him do that to himself. It could be his quirk and, as a result, his body has developed a way to release that energy, hence the outburst of smoke, to limit potential damage in future battles. After she finished giving her thoughts on the matter of Midoriya's quirk, Momo saw the others, mainly Ochako and Kyoka, looking at her with wide eyes. Ida appeared to mull over her words. Todoroki, on the other hand, didn't look entirely convinced for whatever reason, but she couldn't necessarily blame him. Momo knew the idea was a shot in the dark. It's a possibility, Ida murmured. Quirks are biological at the end of the day. It'd be no different for an animal to eventually evolve new traits or behavior to benefit its survival over a long enough period of time. But aren't they supposed to be, gradual? Kyoka pointed out. I don't know about any of you, but I don't recall Midoriya here ever leaking smoke. Other than when the dude mumbles. Midoriya blushed hard. Sorry. His response got a few amused smiles and laughs from the others. A silence followed their laughs, but nothing about it was uncomfortable. Momo was about to ask Midoriya something, finally finding the courage to ask what's been on her mind since the exam, but that was stopped when a muffled phone ringtone broke the silence. Oops, my bad, Kyoka told them, flipping her backpack around and fishing for her phone. When she pulled it out and looked at her screen, Momo saw her friend's eyes widen. "Crap, is that the time?" Kyoka questioned. Her outburst grabbed the attention of the others. A few like Todoroki and Ida did the same, glancing at the clock over the door. Even Ochako couldn't resist flipping open her phone. Everyone's reactions varied. "Midoriya," Ida called out, clearing his throat. I hate to be rude, and it's very unbecoming of a hero to walk away from someone, let alone their friend, but it's okay," Midoriya told him with a look of understanding. "And I don't want to be the reason why you guys miss your trains home. Believe me, you coming to check up on me is enough in my book. So go if you need to." "You sure?" Ochako asked. Midoriya offered up a rare sight, a playful smile. "Go, I'll be fine," he told the brunette. "The last thing I want to be responsible for is any of you getting home late." "What about you?" "Uraraka, I'll be okay." Midoriya, for whatever reason, glanced at the clock. "I still have something I need to get done before I go home." While Ochako didn't look fully convinced by Midoriya's answer, it was enough for Kyoka. Momo saw her musically talented friend rush in and grabbed Ochako by the hand. "Come on." Kyoka started dragging the brunette toward the door. "You and I need to get going. Our train leaves in a few minutes, and I do not want to be alone on those trains with all those people in suits around." "You'll see Midoriya tomorrow, Ochako. See ya, guys." Once those two had left the room and their voices could no longer be heard, it was like a domino effect. The next classmate to get up was Ida. Though unlike Ochako, the speedster got a chance to exchange goodbyes with Midoriya. As he was about to leave, Momo saw him look her way. Yaoyorozu, I must apologize for informing you so late on the matter, but I wanted to let you know that both representatives of 1B are interested in a lunch meeting tomorrow," Ida revealed. "And I will ensure that I write you a proper apology letter for neglecting my duties as class president." Momo closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly exhaled. "It's fine, Ida," she replied, finding his punishment to be frankly over the top. "If it's all right with you, I can text Kendo and confirm it." "Excellent idea, Vice Representative." With that enthusiastic response, Ida was out the door in a manner befitting of the class president. After he was no longer in earshot, Todoroki decided to say what's on everyone's mind. "He scares me sometimes." "He's not that bad," Midoriya softly countered. Todoroki raised a brow. "Yes, he is." Momo saw the dual quirk user point in her direction. "Let's not forget she deals with him more than you and I do daily. So let's ask Yaoyorozu." "I don't wish to speak about my fellow representative without him here," Momo stated, unable to prevent herself from laughing nervously. "It would only be fair if he were here to defend himself from such comments. And it wouldn't be appropriate to ask me because—" Her voice began to trail off, sweating nervously from even the looks she was getting from Midoriya and Todoroki, the latter of whom sat there with his arms crossed. Fine." Momo exhaled dramatically. "Ida sometimes tends to go overboard, but I understand why he does, okay? She recalls a few of their conversations since he was handed the role by Midoriya. He wants to live up to the expectations people have of him, and do right by Midoriya." "Me?" Her green-haired classmate genuinely looked surprised. Momo nodded. "So it leads back to you, huh?" Todoroki questioned, turning his attention to Midoriya. A slight smile formed on the son of Endeavor's face. "I swear, your craziness better not rub off on him. His craziness was bad enough alone." "I'm not crazy," Midoriya retorted. Todoroki stood up from the bed he was sitting on. "Sure, keep telling yourself that. Anyway, I have to get going before I start receiving phone calls from home about why I'm late," Todoroki said tiredly while making his way out of the room. "Take care, you two, and I'll see you tomorrow in class." With Todoroki's departure, Momo was left in a situation she hadn't expected, being alone in the nurse's office with Midoriya. Something that wasn't by him either. "Sue, you like archery, huh?" 10. When they stepped foot inside the principal's office, Tashinori was greeted by the smell of tea. He took a moment to scan the room until his sunken eyes landed on a familiar white-haired chimera, who was seated on one of the couches with a cup of tea held in his paws. To anyone, Nizu appeared remarkably calm. Toshinori looked for a few moments longer until he noticed a particular detail that gave it away. The cup was ever so slightly shaking. That's a first. It appears he wasn't the only one nervous about this upcoming conversation with Midoriya's homeroom teacher. "Sit down," Aizawa said sternly, walking right by him. Not wanting to further PSS off his coworker, Toshinori did what was asked of him without complaint in hopes of making their discussion go smoother. He made his way over to the couch with Nizu, took his seat, and quietly waited for whatever was going to be said by Aizawa. Sitting across from them, Aizawa stared at them with his bloodshot eyes, his lips set into a frown, and his hands folded together. "So who's going to tell me what's going on with Midoriya?" the underground hero asked, eyeing them with suspicion. "Unless you two wanna ignore what happened out there." "Aizawa, I understand your—" "No." Toshinori's eyes widened at his coworker interrupting their boss, and Aizawa wasn't finished. "I don't believe you do, sir," Aizawa retorted calmly. "I have been a teacher for many years here. I have given you the benefit of the doubt, and you've done the same for me. However, what I saw—" Aizawa pointed to the door. "That is not normal. I've watched Midoriya progress with his quirk since the day he walked into this school. He proved me wrong, but I also know when something doesn't add up." Deep down, Toshinori hoped their conversation would be about anything else. Yet he knew there was no way someone like Aizawa would ignore what happened. "What leads you to believe such a thing?" Nizu questioned, his beady eyes solely focused on Aizawa. Quirks rarely evolve in a linear path. There are many abilities that, when compared to others, appear to defy everything we know about them. But it's one thing for someone to be born with a quirk that defies expectation. It's another thing entirely when it appears to be a separate quirk altogether, Aizawa countered, eyes narrowed at the principal. Releasing enough smoke to cover several city blocks has nothing to do with the otherworldly strength or the green lightning Midoriya's quirk produces. Toshinori grimaced at the mention of the incident. "Aizawa," Nizu said, grabbing the underground hero's attention. He sighed. "I admire your curiosity, and I applaud your willingness to go to great lengths to understand your student's quirk, but I must also remind you that interrogating a faculty member and I is not proper conduct." Nizu lightly scolded him. "Maybe I am jumping to conclusions," Aizawa admitted. Toshinori, however, saw his haggard-looking coworker eyeing him with distrust. "But I want to hear what you have to say, All Might." Toshinori knew he wasn't going to escape this conversation cleanly, especially after their talk on the bus earlier today. "I was just as surprised as you were," Toshinori said truthfully, meeting Aizawa's gaze. "Believe me, I had." Toshinori sighed and shook his head. "I have no clue what's going on either with his quirk." Aizawa regarded for a moment. "So you had no idea about Midoriya being able to suddenly unleash a cloud of purple smoke?" "No, I didn't." When it came to One for All, there were still aspects of the quirk that Toshinori never fully understood despite wielding it for the past 40 years. "And I had less of a reason after I thought I—" He stopped himself from going any further down that rabbit hole. It would only do more harm than good. Plus, I can't give Aizawa any more of a reason to be suspicious of me. He already dislikes me as is. And it looks he didn't either from his reaction during the exam, Aizawa mentioned to them, leaning toward them. "That boy," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "So what are we going to do about it?" Nizu inquired, taking another sip from his tea. "If we truly are facing an unusual situation where a student may have either awakened a new quirk, or their quirk has evolved in a way that doesn't align with our current understanding, then what are we, the school, going to do about it?" The question hung in the air. Toshinori remembered his promise to try to help Midoriya figure out what's happening with One for All. A bond they shared, one thicker than blood itself. And I refuse to let Midoriya wander through the darkness alone. I've already failed him enough, Toshinori thought guiltily. For starters, we're going to need him to explore this. Aizawa paused momentarily, then continued. smoke generation ability and help him find ways of utilizing it in training exercises moving forward. I can also be of assistance, Aizawa. Toshinori saw his coworker stare at him for several moments, as if he were searching for something. A snort followed not long after. I swear, you're not doing yourself any favors, Aizawa retorted, though his expression did become a touch grateful. But I do appreciate your willingness to help. You do. Truthfully, I'd rather you not feed into those rumors about the true nature of your relationship. Believe it's already annoying enough, Aizawa stated bluntly. That said, this could serve as a chance for you to truly take your role as a teacher here more seriously. While you may be this nation's symbol of peace, you are also committed to helping foster the next generation of heroes. Here's your chance. Thank you, Toshinori replied, grateful for the chance to help his successor. I'll do my best. Aizawa nodded. While their conversation surrounding the nature of Midoriya's quirk began to die down and shift over to how best to help him moving forward, Toshinori stole glances at Aizawa. He's suspicious. There's no way around it. Anything I do or say from this point forward will probably end up in some notebook he has stored somewhere, Toshinori thought. It looks like he'll be having a talk with Midoriya about what he wants to do. 10. How come you never talked about it before? Izuku asked, glancing over to his right. Yaoyorozu shrugged her shoulders. It never came up as a topic, she answered, eyes forward while they walked out of their school's main doors. And, I know this might make me sound terrible, I also just wanted to keep some things private about myself, Yaoyorozu further explained. I get that, Izuku replied softly, understanding her feelings on the matter. And it doesn't make you terrible or anything. It makes sense. Sometimes we like to keep things close to the chest. Experience. Izuku's mind flashed through the years he spent being treated lower than dirt by numerous classmates after learning he was quirkless. I guess you could say that, he said cryptically. However, Izuku didn't let his mind relive those days. Things are different. His earlier interaction with the others steamrolled those memories into oblivion. Still, Izuku continued, I think it's cool you know how to use a bow. You think so? Yaoyorozu asked him shyly. He nodded, smiling at her. It's like you're a character straight out of a comic book. Honestly, I think you should consider incorporating it more often for combat training. You probably use up less lipids for a bow and arrows than some of the more lipid-intensive items you can make, even that boxing glove arrow you used on Mr. Aizawa. It reminded me of... Snapping his fingers a few times, Izuku was trying to remember their name. Green Arrow. Yaoyorozu suggested. Yeah, him. He saw her expression morph into a thinking one, putting a finger against her chin. I never put much thought into it. I briefly considered it during the incident at USJ. Her lips formed into a frown. But I decided against using a bow. It's one thing to shoot at a target down range or under the circumstances of today, but against a real criminal or villain, that's when the chances of something going wrong go up. Taking her words into consideration, Izuku saw her point. He took a deep breath, hoping not to break this fragile camaraderie he's built up with Yaoyorozu over the course of today. Something can always go wrong, Yaoyorozu. We can't always control the outcome or, sometimes, the situation we find ourselves in. All we can do is react as heroes and find the best possible solution. Izuku's fight with Todoroki came back into mind. It's your quirk, not his. And that also means we can't hold back, he continued, his eyes meeting hers. You're really good, Yaoyorozu. I mean, during the chaos at the end of the exam, you still found that sliver within the cloud of smoke to hit Mr. Aizawa. If you can do that, I think you should heavily consider using a bow more often, and you looked pretty cool to me while doing it. A light tinge of red appeared on his cheeks when he commented on her appearance. And, without him realizing it, a similar color formed on her face. You thought I looked cool? She asked. Why, yeah, I did. Yaoyorozu proceeded to clear her throat. Why, thank you, Midoriya. That's an incredibly thoughtful thing for you to say. As for your suggestion, I will consider it. I hope I wasn't overstepping, Izuku added with an awkward laugh. No, You were perfectly respectful, she replied. And, honestly, I'm glad I got the chance to have a real conversation with you. He saw her lips form an almost excited smile. I heard a lot about you from Ochako, especially your interest in quirks. She says you've got quite the imagination regarding their possible uses even after looking at them once. She told you about that? She did, Yaoyorozu confirmed, nodding. A while back actually. It might have been when we hung out with the other girls. Oh, your mutterings too, but I think we all know about it by this point. Izuku chuckled briefly. I knew that was coming. To be fair, you do it pretty often. Though I think it says a lot about you, Yaoyorozu said, continuing from her earlier comment. In what way? Yaoyorozu smiled at him. You leave no stone unturned. Seeing how quickly you've gained control over that quirk of yours is proof enough. It makes me a little curious to see how you'll use that smoke you can generate moving forward, she explained. I may have a few ideas for it, if I can actually control it. I'm sure you will, Midoriya. Izuku blushed hard. Thanks. With that, the two students walked past the school's main gate and onto the public sidewalk. Neither teenager said another word, standing awkwardly and unsure of what to say. Though the silence between them was soon broken by the sound of a horn honking, grabbing their attention. Several feet away, Izuku spotted a rare sight. A limo? He muttered. I'm sorry, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu apologized, doing a slight bow. I wish you and I could have had more time to talk, but I have a feeling Mr. Otsuka might be a little annoyed with me. Did I keep? No, she said, shaking her head. It's all right. I made the choice to stick around for longer because I wanted an opportunity to speak with you. So don't blame yourself, okay? Yaoyorozu told him. Izuku glanced at the limo waiting nearby before looking back at Yaoyorozu. Besides the time he spent carrying her around during the exam, this was also yet another moment where he truly got a good look at her face and realized how pretty Yaoyorozu is. I won't, he muttered, slightly nodding. Good. I'll see you tomorrow in class, Izuku. The sudden use of his given name left the boy stunned, unsure of what to say or do. He did, however, hear the sound of footsteps, realizing Yaoyorozu was walking with a hurried step. Before she got in the limo, Izuku saw her look his way one more time before offering an awkward smile with her cheeks dark red. That image was burned into his mind. Cute. Staring out the passenger side window, Izuku observed the city flying past them from the inside of his mentor's pickup truck. Though he was far from paying attention to the scenery, his mind had yet to move past the conversation he shared with Yaoyorozu after everyone left. I'm so used to nearly everyone either using my last name or Deku. It felt good to hear her use my name, he thought, failing to realize a smile of fondness formed. However, it wasn't only his name that stuck with him, it was that final image of her before she got into the limo. Everything from the way Yaoyorozu smiled to the light pink dusting her cheeks stirred something in his chest. For whatever reason, Izuku felt his heart rate spike when that image came to mind. Midoriya? But it was pretty fun to talk to her. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk again at some point. Whatever this feeling was inside of him, Izuku did know one thing for certain. Yaoyorozu's awesome. Midoriya? Izuku's thoughts on the raven-haired girl were put on hold after hearing All Might's voice. Turning to his right, he realized his mentor, currently in his real form, was talking to him. Why yeah? Izuku said, stuttering in embarrassment over unintentionally ignoring the hero. Sorry about that, All Might. I was An image of Yaoyorozu flashed in his mind. I was just thinking about stuff. What's on your mind? All Might asked him. Just. Glancing out the window, there was a scene of two parents exiting a store with their son, who was sporting a sweater reminiscent of the #1 hero sitting next to him. Realizing how much my life's changed ever since meeting you, Izuku admitted. I sometimes wonder if this life I've been living is a dream. One that I'll eventually wake up from. He heard All Might chuckle. I can assure you, Midoriya, that the past year and a half we've spent together isn't a dream. But if this really were turn out to be a dream, I'd be sad, you know? You would? I would, his mentor replied softly. All Might's expression turned solemn. To be fully honest with you, kid, I can't explain it. It's just. Their eyes met briefly. You've become a regular part of my life. It would crush me if it turned out the time we spent together was just a figment of my imagination. Or, I don't know. Maybe a sign that I'm finally losing it, All Might stated with a faint amount of humor. Izuku stared at All Might with his mouth ajar. You okay, Midoriya? Snapping out of his stupor, Izuku lightly shook his head. I'm fine, he replied, still trying to take in the words of the man he's idolized since childhood. Izuku's voice trailed off, thinking about his own thoughts on the matter. I'd feel the same way, All Might. And not just about you giving me one for all or anything. Honestly, I'm glad I met you. You mean you're glad you latched onto my leg like a rabid fan? All Might teased. See, can we please forget about that? All Might laughed at his question before wiping a stray tear from his eye. Not a chance, he said. To this day, it probably ranks up there as one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And if she were here, I have a feeling Master would like you after seeing that little display. The mention of the seventh user grabbed Izuku's attention. It was rare for All Might to bring her up in a conversation. She probably meant a lot to him. Moments like these only proved how little Izuku knew about the man beneath the costume. And I want to change that, he realized. Talking with Yaoyorozu today was fun. If it weren't for the fact that they were partnered up, there was a decent chance they would have never gotten to know each other. All Might, Izuku called out to his mentor. What is it? Can you tell me about her? Your master, I mean. The interior of the pickup truck became awfully quiet except for the AC blasting cool air into the cabin with them. For a moment, Izuku wondered if he had gone too far and touched a topic All Might didn't want to speak about right now. That brief panic was eased when he saw his mentor glance at him. His frown morphed into a small smile. I wasn't much older than you were when I first met Nana, All Might revealed to him, but there was a hint of something more to his next words. She had gotten into a fight with several villains and, for whatever reason, I thought it was a bright idea to rush out there and try to help, even picking up a pipe at some point. Izuku gave his mentor a flat face. And you call me crazy? Okay, maybe I was being a little harsh earlier, All Might remarked awkwardly. He proceeded to clear his throat before continuing. Anyway, he said, returning to the story. I, kind of pestered Nana to take me on as a student and teach me what she knows. And did she? She wasn't too receptive to the idea, his mentor said with slightly flushed cheeks. She told me to get lost when I started following her around and kept trying to change her mind. Picturing the scene in his mind, Izuku cracked a smile at the thought of a younger All Might following Nana around, hoping to change her mind on making him a student of hers. In a way, it reminded Izuku of his first meeting with All Might and the decision he made to ask the man about whether a quirkless person could become a hero. So, how did you change her mind? Izuku asked out of curiosity. I told her the truth. Izuku tilted his head. The truth? About the world I wanted to help create, All Might explained with a more serious tone. Things are a lot different nowadays for you and your classmates than they were for people like your mother and me. We still lived in a world with him hanging around in the shadows, ready to destroy the lives of those he saw as beneath him. But Izuku saw his mentor's brow furrow. I hated that. I wanted something better for everyone. I wanted to become a pillar of strength that people could rely on. To know that they don't have to live in fear anymore. More than anything, I wanted to bring peace to their troubled hearts. When he finished speaking, Izuku stared at the number one hero, digesting every word he said. Izuku was genuinely left speechless after hearing his reasoning for, well, why he became All Might. Looking back on our meeting, I really did act like a hypocrite towards you, the hero admitted, his words hanging in the air. I had forgotten what it was like to be in your position, and well, I spat in your face and your dreams despite having gone through the same thing you did. It's fine, Izuku replied quietly. All Might shook his head. No, it's not, he said. Even if I hadn't made you my successor, it was still wrong of me to forget I once stood in your shoes. You were a quirkless kid with big dreams, just like I was. So you're glad I latched onto your leg? The weak joke got a chuckle out of his mentor. In a strange way, I am glad you did. Though I hope your mother never finds out what you did. I'm sure she'd kill you, then probably kill me afterward. She wouldn't kill us, I think. That is easily the least confident answer I've ever heard leave your mouth, Midoriya. Izuku's shoulders sagged. Shut up, he muttered. Though it was hard to miss the growing smile on both their faces, they promptly shared a laugh. Despite what happened today, Izuku was looking forward to what tomorrow had in store for him. It can't be that bad, can it? 10. Other the occasional sound of commercials playing in the background on the television, Inko's eyes kept glancing over to the large window that dominated one of the walls of the living room, where she waited to see a familiar head of green hair. While Izuku had texted her ahead of time, letting her know he would be late, Inko found it difficult to push aside her concern until her son came through the front door. In other news, All Might is expected to be making an appearance at I-Island for the annual gala held in honor of some of the best heroes in the world. Inko turned the television off with the remote, staring at the blackened screen for a few moments before focusing back on her knitting. I really have grown sensitive to this stuff, she murmured, realizing her tolerance for hearing about hero-related topics had declined in the past few months. She knew the reason why. But I promised I'd support his dream, no matter what, right? Inko questioned softly, wondering if her friend, Mitsuki, ever felt anxious whenever she sent Bakugo off to school. The USJ incident, the sports festival, and hearing about that terrible serial killer, Stain, over these past few weeks has been difficult for Inko to stomach, especially considering she knew Izuku was involved in the first two situations. As for that awful criminal, Izuku hadn't shared much about the incident, but she suspected he was involved in some way, shape, or form. After all, her baby boy can't lie to save his life. Maybe Inko didn't finish her sentence, hearing what sounded like a car outside. Stitching her brows together, she put aside the blanket she was working on for a neighbor next door and got up from the couch. She made her way toward the window, opening the curtain wider than it already was. It didn't take long for her to find the source of the noise. A red pickup truck was parked in front of the apartment complex. Inko stared at the vehicle for several long moments until the passenger door swung open, where she was greeted by the sight of Izuku. Seeing her son step out of the unknown truck left Inko stunned, wondering who was driving the car, but that question would be put on hold temporarily. After her son exchanged words with whoever was driving, he closed the door and started making his way upstairs. Inko remained rooted in her spot until she heard the sound of locks being undone, followed by the door opening. Mom, I'm home. Welcome back, sweetheart, Ink replied, stuttering a bit. Turning away from the window, she saw Izuku step into the living room, where she noticed a bandage on his cheek. In that moment, her motherly instincts took over. What happened? She asked frantically, crossing the room at a speed that would have rivaled a hero. Ink checked over Izuku for any more injuries. Are you okay? Did something awful happen while you were attending school? Did another villain attack you and your classmates? Her barrage of questions left the boy stunned momentarily. I'm okay, Izuku replied, cutting through her questions with a smile. And no, we weren't attacked or anything like that, Mom. Today was our final exam and, there was a practical portion that may or may not have gotten a bit out of control, but other than a cut to my cheek, I'm okay, he told her. Are you sure? He nodded. Yup. Inko sighed in relief at knowing her son was okay. Good, I'm glad to hear, she said, feeling some of her earlier anxiety dissipate. Though that wasn't the only topic on her mind. By the way, Inko called out to him. Honey, who was driving that pickup truck? The one that dropped you off. Izuku, Inko said, raising a brow. She saw her son look away, scratching his cheek awkwardly. What are you talking about, Mom? Sweetheart. Please don't lie to me, Inko replied, hands on her hips and eyebrows knitted together. I saw you get out of the truck from the window, she said, gesturing to one behind her. Now, are you going to tell me who it was that dropped you off? Or am I going to have to take away that new action figure you bought the other day? No. The look of sheer terror on her son's face nearly made her mask slip, But Inko kept a straight face in an attempt to get an answer out of Izuku. It wasn't much longer after that did her son suddenly get out his phone for whatever reason and dialed someone. Yeah? That's when she heard Izuku whisper harshly into the phone, telling the person, "Get up here now." She said she was going to take away my limited edition Silver Age version of All Might, Izuku muttered, giving her a weird look for some odd reason. "Just come upstairs." "Yes, right now." While she couldn't entirely hear the person on the other end of the line, Inko heard what sounded like a masculine voice. Could it be a teacher? She mentally questioned. It was a possibility, but she did find the idea to be no better than a random stranger dropping her son off. He'll be here soon, Mom," Izuku suddenly said, bringing Inko out of her thoughts. Inko knitted her brows together. "Who?" "My trainer." "Trainer?" Inko blinked several times at his answer. Her face contorted into confusion. I didn't know you had a trainer." When did you get one?" She asked him. Is that?" Let me go check," Izuku answered quickly, moving away from her and towards the front door. "Just wait here for a second, okay?" he told her. Initially, she remained rooted in her spot until hearing the front door open, followed by what sounded like harsh whispering being exchanged between her son and another person. Curiosity getting the better of her, Inko took a few steps forward and peeked around the wall that separated the living room and the front entrance area. That's when she saw her son standing there, talking to a rather tall, gaunt man with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, despite them appearing to be sunken in. "Izuku?" The sudden sound of her voice cut their conversation short, drawing similar reactions from her son and the man he was speaking with. Both of them simultaneously jumped and let out panicked yelps. Is this your trainer?" she asked, undeterred by their reactions, and approached the man cautiously, but with a hint of skepticism. Inko didn't like assuming things about people. However, no one would have immediately guessed him to be a trainer of any kind. "Wise he is," Izuku answered, rather quickly, she might add. "Meet the trainer stepped in when her son's voice trailed off. "Tashinori Yaga, ma'am," he said, performing a slight bow with a touch of respect behind his greeting. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Midoriya." "Likewise," Inko replied, ignoring the mention of her marital status. Mr. Yagi must have picked up on her quiet response when she saw him glance at her son, almost like he was looking for an answer. Inko reached out and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, who looked a bit hesitant to reply until he turned her way. Their eyes met briefly before she nodded, turning toward the man. She paused, memories of the night their lives changed flashed before her eyes. Inko shook the image of police officers standing in front of her door, hats off. "I'm not married," Inko simply told him. Thankfully, it appears Mr. Yagi understood her meaning and accepted the answer without issue. A hint of sympathy appeared on his face. "Of course," he replied. "Thank you." With that potential misunderstanding cleared up, Inko invited the man inside their home with the hopes of discovering whether or not her son's claim about him being his trainer was true or not. After telling him to take a seat on the couch and asking Izuku to keep him company, Inko took the opportunity to get her thoughts together. Could he? Inko recalled her son coming up to her out of the blue months ago with a piece of paper, outlining how he could get his body ready for the hero course at the high school of his dream. Honestly, Inko didn't think much of it at the time. Kids looked up stuff all the time on the internet. Glancing over her shoulder, she looked at them, sitting on the couch with their back to her. She saw her son, as per usual, being his animated self, but there was some anxiousness from the way he sat on the couch with his back straight, occasionally rubbing his neck, and smiled stiffly. As for the blonde-haired man, he appeared to be chuckling at Izuku's behavior. It put a smile on her face. Turning away from the scene playing out, Inko finished preparing the tea before heading over with the small tray in hand. The closer she got, the clearer their conversation got. "Doesn't seem so scary to me," the blonde-haired man said to her son. "And not always, but she." Inko made herself known to them. "Who are you referring to, sweetheart?" she asked sweetly, which got a reaction out of Izuku. He froze up before twisting his head in her direction. "No one," Izuku replied. "I hope so." With that, Inko placed the small tray with 3 teacups on the coffee table, directly in front of the couch occupied by her son and the man he's claiming to be his trainer. "I'm terribly sorry if my son inconvenienced you," Inko said, giving a slight bow while shooting Izuku a look. Mr. Yagi shook his head. "Not at all," he replied, hand reaching to grab a cup from the tray. "In fact, I was hoping to meet you one of these days, Ms. Midoriya." His answer left her a bit surprised. "Really?" "Very much so," Mr. Yagi said with a smile while he placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "The truth is I've been helping your son for quite some time on behalf of, He hesitated momentarily, glancing at Izuku, who looked nervous. However, when he continued, the answer that left his mouth caused her to nearly drop the cup in her hand. "My boss, All Might, took an interest in your son some time ago and asked me to get him ready for UA High." Inko stared at the skinny man for what felt like an eternity. "Excuse me?" She barely recognized her voice in the moment from how painfully quiet it was, even by her standards. "Did you just say your B-boss is?" "I did," he confirmed. Slowly, the green-haired woman turned to her son. "Izuku, can you come with me to the kitchen for a second? I need help with something, do you mind?" she asked. "Sure?" Izuku answered. Hesitantly. Without any warning, Inko walked over, grabbed Izuku by the sleeve of his school shirt, and dragged him to the kitchen with a surprising amount of strength. Once they were far enough away, Inko let her true feelings out. "When were you going to tell me about this?" Inko whispered frantically, using her hand to block Mr. Yagi from being able to see her mouth. "You mean about training under Mr. Yagi, or about meeting All Might?" Inko's response was simple, "Yes." She saw her son occasionally glance over at his trainer before explaining. "I was going to tell you about it at some point," he told her. "It's just, I haven't exactly figured out how to word it. I know you're worried about me, especially after USJ, and I don't like making you worry. So when Mr. Yagi offered to train me, I took it." "And how long has this been going on, honey?" Inko asked with a pensive look. "A while," he admitted. Inko knitted her brows together. "Before UA High?" "Why, yeah." It made sense when she thought about it. He was never the same after the incident with that terrible slime criminal. And they said it was All Might who saved the day. Is that how they met? Inko wondered in that moment, remembering the terror she felt when Izuku told her the truth after he came home in the state that he was in. Izuku looked at her anxiously. "Are you mad?" "No," Inko said in response with a small smile. "I'm not mad, sweetheart. But can I be a hero too?" Even after it's been a decade since that night, Inko never forgot Izuku's tearful expression and asking a question she struggled to answer either way. Yet hearing her son admit he not only got to meet his idol since childhood, but possessed the kind of potential to warrant receiving a trainer, elicited a feeling deep in her chest. "Mom." The sound of her son's voice snapped Inko out of her thoughts. Focusing back on him, she saw a hint of concern in his expression. "I'm fine," she replied, offering him a teary-eyed smile. "In fact, you could say I'm happy. So happy to know." Inko took a moment to wipe away the tears. "That a hero like him saw something in you. Something I..." Izuku cut her words off with a hug. "It's okay," he said, his arms wrapped around her. "You said you would support me from that day onward, and you've kept your promise, Mom." "That doesn't change what happened, though," Inko retorted bitterly, letting the feelings she's bottled up for the past few months slip through momentarily. "I should've... No, I needed to." Tears gathered in the corner of her eyes, unable to get the words out of her mouth. "Mom," Izuku called out to her gently. Lifting her head, Inko looked up to see her son smiling at her. For a moment, she was reminded of those days he wanted to rescue her in his All Might pajamas. The days before him finding out he was quirkless, at the time, she bitterly reminded herself. "You did what you thought was right," Izuku said, never losing that smile of his. "Nothing can change that. You've supported me every single day since I started going to UA High." But she saw her son blink the tears out of his eyes. "I couldn't be happier, and I want you to know that." So please don't think you made a mistake by not telling me those words. But I do. No matter the kind words her son told her, it did little to alleviate the guilt she harbored about that night. It was only made worse when she glanced at the blonde-haired trainer, who remained seated on the couch, but was struggling to pretend he wasn't listening. All Might believed in my son, enough to offer him a trainer, and I couldn't tell him the one thing he wanted to hear most, Inko concluded regretfully. You can become a hero. When those words reached her ear, Inko froze for a moment. Turning to the source behind those words, the green-haired woman saw Izuku's trainer heading towards them with a melancholic expression. He paused a few steps away, his eyes boring into hers. I want to apologize beforehand for what I'm about to say, ma'am, but I understand your feelings on this matter. While I may not be a father myself, I do remember my initial hesitation about training your son. In that moment, Inko saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Let's just say Inko saw him look over at her son, his lips forming into a guilt-ridden smile. I didn't see what All Might saw in your son either. I was rather rash after learning he wanted to become a hero. It's a failure I've been trying to rectify in recent times. That's not Tr. Midoriya, Mr. Yagi cut her son off by gently calling out to him. We've already talked about this. Do you remember? He asked, his question making Izuku pause. Inko saw what almost looked like a silent conversation unfold between them until, after what felt like an eternity, Izuku gave a hesitant nod, followed by a quiet, I do. Their interaction may have been incredibly brief, but Inko didn't miss how strongly her son reacted to Mr. Yagi admitting to not fully believing in her son either. Most of all, she saw the guilt in his eyes. It was subtle. Most would miss it. Yet, Inko recognized it because she saw that same look in the mirror for the past decade. Ms. Midoriya? Mr. Yagi's voice stirred Inko from her thoughts. Realizing the state she was in, Inko wiped away what was left of her tears and tried to compose herself. I'm terribly sorry, she said, feeling embarrassed for allowing a stranger to see her in this manner. I didn't mean to. Inko sighed, struggling to find the right words in the moment. It's all right, he told her with a look of understanding. I assumed I crossed a line for what I said. Inko shook her head. No, you didn't. That's a relief to hear. The brief silence that followed, however, didn't last for long. It was soon broken by a sound that left Inko stumped, especially considering who it sounded like. I am here. I'm here. I am H. She watched Mr. Yagi dig into his pocket and answer his cell phone immediately, covering his mouth and moving away from them, deeper into the living room. When he was far enough away, Inko turned to her son. Was that? Why yeah, Izuku said, nodding. Apparently, All Might thinks it, makes for a good ringtone or something along those lines. He wasn't too specific about it. Ink furrowed her brows. Really? Aha. In all her years, Inko never heard much about their country's greatest hero besides the snippets on the radio or television. While she wouldn't pass judgment on the man, she did find it odd that he'd make an employee use his voice as a ringtone. Glancing back at his trainer, Inko saw him finish up his call, but she saw how he slumped over and looked exhausted for some reason. Is everything okay? Inko asked Mr. Yagi, who walked back over to them. He nodded. Everything's fine, and thank you for asking, the blonde-haired trainer replied. However, the pleasant smile he had was instantly replaced with a look of dread. Unfortunately, I have to go. An old and grumpy friend of mine needs me to come over to help him. Is it? Izuku asked, sounding as if he knew who his trainer was referring to. Indeed, my young Padawan. Inko lifted her eyebrows in surprise, not expecting to hear that of all things. Meanwhile, her son tilted his head in confusion, staring at his trainer. What? Don't worry about it. Inko's lips curled into a light-hearted smile as she patted her son's shoulder. It was from before your time, she said to him, then turned towards Mr. Yagi. But please, if you need to go, feel free. I don't want you to keep your friend waiting. All right, Mr. Yagi momentarily stuttered, as if he was caught off guard for some reason. Well, if you want, Ms. Midoriya, I can come by another day, and we can speak more on this matter. I'm sure you have questions regarding your son, and I would do my best to answer them. I would. She sent the man an appreciative smile. I'd like that, Mr. Yagi. After giving her answer, Inko watched the man dig into his pocket for a moment before pulling a small, rectangular-shaped piece of paper. He presented it to her. Here's a business card. The number on there should work, Mr. Yagi said, giving her a glimpse at the crumpled piece of paper that looked rather old. Should? Inko questioned with a hint of amusement. He pulled the card back, cheeks flushed. Your son also has my personal cell number if you need to reach me, the trainer mentioned, shoving the card back into his pocket. Anyway, Mr. Yagi suddenly said, trying to move on. It was very nice to meet you, Ms. Midoriya. I look forward to the next time we get a chance to speak. With that, Mr. Yagi left their apartment with a hurried step, as if he were in a race against time. Either he must be concerned for his friend or scared of him. She saw literal sweat coming down his forehead at one point during their conversation after answering that call. So, what do you think of him? Izuku asked. Inko, who had been in the middle of locking the front door, stopped when she heard Izuku's question. It took her a second to gather her thoughts. He's certainly what I expected, Inko commented. But? She looked over her shoulder and cracked a smile at her son. I can tell he cares about you. And for me, that's more than enough for me to know he's a good man, Inko stated honestly. 10. Ms. Yaoyorozu, are you awake, my lady? When she heard the familiar voice of her family's head maid, Graphia, coming from the other side of the pristine wooden doors, Momo lazily lifted her head off the pillow and glanced in the direction from which the voice was coming. Too early, she murmured before putting her head down with the hope of falling asleep again. Unfortunately, her wish would not be granted. A moment later, the doors suddenly flew open, as if they were hit by a powerful gust of wind, which promptly ruined Momo's hopes of going back to sleep. Why? Momo groaned out, slowly sitting up in her bed while rubbing her eye. Standing at the foot of her bed was a woman roughly in her late 20s with pale skin, beautiful silver hair tied into a long braid on each side, and red eyes. She was dressed in a French-maid outfit. It's time to get up, the woman stated calmly, hands folded in front of her. Was blowing my doors open truly necessary? Momo questioned after letting out a yawn. Stretching her arms upward, she took a look over at the said doors. She saw they hadn't hit the walls. Father told you not to break my doors again? She teased, which earned a reaction from Graphia. Cheeky this morning, aren't we? That's what happens when you wake me up at. Reaching over to her nightstand, lightly tapped her phone screen to see the time. Momo knitted her brows together before turning to Graphia. It's barely 5 o'clock in the morning, she remarked, unable to hold back her slight irritation about being woken up 30 minutes earlier than usual. Graphia maintained a composed expression, though it wasn't difficult to spot the woman's lips curling into a slight smile. I can't very well call myself a maid if I disregard a request from my employers. Wait till they're here? Momo asked, eyes widening. They are, Graphia confirmed. Her earlier irritation about being woken up early was thrown aside. Momo, without asking any more questions, tossed the covers off and got up from her bed. She was about to rush past Graphia when the silver-haired woman suddenly raised her arm and barred Momo from leaving her room. Not so fast, young lady. Momo was about to demand why Graphia was stopping her, but it took a moment for her to look down and realize she was still in her sleeping gown. Oh, she murmured, blushing out of embarrassment. It's all right, Graphia told her with a kind smile. Always keep in mind, my lady, a Yaoyorozu should always present well, even in front of family. Right. Graphia nodded. I'll inform your parents that you're awake and that you'll be done shortly. With that, Momo waited until her family's maid left her bedroom before going about her usual routine of preparing for the upcoming school day. During the process, however, Momo's mind wandered a few times, already looking ahead to their summer break that was about to begin. I wonder if they'll mind if I bring a few friends with us to Island, she thought out loud, knowing the famous expo was not too far away. Yet, more importantly, there was one other big event she was excited to attend. I wonder what they'll have this year, Momo said, imagining the cosplay outfits, figures on sale, and the chance to meet even a few authors who will be there. The bubble she was in burst after hearing the sound of her alarm. Momo finished tying her hair into her usual ponytail before turning it off. Looking back up, Momo was greeted by the sight of her face in the mirror. "It's also because you're cute." Momo sighed, remembering her time spent with Iwabami. "I really should have put more thought into my choice for the internship," she said with a hint of regret. "I wonder if I maybe should have asked Midoriya, as Ochako told me. It would have probably advised against interning with a hero like her." Getting up from the chair she was sitting in, Momo made sure to grab her backpack and phone before heading downstairs, a slight pep in her step, as her parents were likely waiting for her. The journey through the estate was nothing new for the heiress. A maze of hallways and rooms she's learned to navigate over the years. In addition, Momo greeted the various servants who made the estate function on a daily basis. Many of whom she's known since childhood. Everything from simple nods to encouragement about the upcoming school day. "Good morning, Ms. Yayarozu. Have a good day. Don't forget to eat breakfast, Lady Yayarozu." Of course, Momo returned each of their greetings with ease. "It's easy, isn't it?" she thought, knowing that these people were around her on a daily basis. Though she didn't go any further than that. It would do nothing but bring up a reality Momo's come to accept. Reaching the end of the hallway, she was greeted by the main stairwell that led to the front entrance of the estate. She climbed down the steps and made her way to the kitchen, which was alive with activity. Everything from her family's private chef working his usual magic to maids bringing over plates, cups, and cutlery to the sizable island, where two people were seated. A scene that happened a few times a month under the best of circumstances. Yet it did little in preventing that surge of emotions at getting to see her parents. "Mom? Dad?" Her voice, while somewhat muffled by the noise being made in the kitchen, hadn't escaped the ears of the two adults in the kitchen. Both turned their head in her direction, revealing a set of faces that came to life with smiles. Tired ones, but smiles nonetheless. In a display that would have surprised several of her classmates at school. Momo borderline ran over to her parents. Crossing the distance rapidly, Momo threw her arms around them when she was in range, hugging them tightly. "Good to see you too, sweetheart," Momo's father replied in a strained tone, gently patting her on the back. "We appreciate the warm welcome, but..." Momo gasped, realizing what she did. Immediately, she let go of her parents and took a step back with flushed cheeks. "Sorry," she apologized quietly, scratching her cheek with a finger. "That wasn't very appropriate of me." "It's all right," Momo's mother said with a chuckle, pushing back a few stray hairs. "We were away for a bit longer than normal, honey. Sorry about that. We would have been back a few weeks ago like normal, but some unexpected problems arose while we were in New York City," her father added, running a hand through his dark hair. Momo saw him take a look at her mother before wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "But I can officially say that was our last trip for a while." Momo heard her mother snort. "Don't jinx us, dear." It'll be fine," her father replied casually, shrugging his shoulders. "Plus, I did tell Mr. Fox to keep an eye on things for us until the end of the summer. He's done it for us in the past." The mention of her father's longtime friend and a rather important figure within the family company hadn't escaped Momo's hearing. "How is Mr. Fox doing, by the way?" she asked her parents. "He's doing fine," Momo's mother answered, her lips forming a smile. "A little worse for wear, but he did willingly take on the task of looking after his grandchild while his son and daughter-in-law went on a vacation." Momo chuckled. "I'm sure he's having fun." "Actually," Momo's father spoke up, grabbing her attention. "That does remind me, you should know your sister and her husband are going to be visiting in a few weeks," he revealed, which made Momo's eyes go wide. She's really?" "She is," Momo's mother confirmed with a nod. "We actually spoke with her not too long ago. She and her husband were able to carve out some time for a visit. And before you ask me, yes, you'll get to see your niece and nephews." A blush appeared. "I wasn't going to ask," Momo weakly countered, though it appears her words did little in convincing her mother and father, from the looks they sent her way. "Aha," her mother said. "But, did she say when exactly?" Momo asked nervously. The answer came from her father. She won't be here until after you get back from that training camp you told us about, but you know how your sister is, if she had it her way, she'd be here tomorrow, he said to her. But enough about us. Why don't you tell us about how things have going for you at school over a plate of waffles, sir? A maid who walked by them said. Excellent, her father stated with a cheerful tone. I could go for some waffles. What about you too? He asked, receiving the same answer from both of them. Of course you asked for waffles. At least you didn't break any bones during the entire exam. It's certainly an improvement after the first few months of school, and I'm sure Recovery Girl will appreciate the effort as well. Izuku stared at Shoto with a blank expression on his face. That's it? After everything I just told you right now, that's what you take away from the entire situation, man? The dual quirk user shrugged his shoulders at his friend's response. Look, I'm not exactly going to comment on whatever is happening between you and Yaoyorozu. All I will say, however, is good luck with that. Come on. Shoto shook his head at his friend's surprise at hearing that. You can't be serious. I wasn't the only person in our class to see our vice president hugging you after you guys captured Mr. Aizawa. I already heard some people talking about if something is happening between you two. Unable to decide between blushing in silence or denying such rumors, Izuku had gone with some form of both. He carefully waved his hands while his face resembled something like a tomato. Emi and Momo? No, there's nothing going on between us. In his poor attempt to explain himself, Izuku had made an enormous mistake by referring to his partner by her first name. A mistake that evoked a reaction from Shoto, which was nothing more than raising an eyebrow, and made him question his friend. First name, huh? What? Shoto smiled in amusement, which was nothing more than his mouth twitching upwards for a moment, and explained himself. If you're going to deny anything happened between you and the vice president, I don't think using her first name is going to help with the situation. I was just. Izuku failed to come up with a reason, until his friend waved him off. You don't need to say anything to me. Currently, Izuku and Shoto were standing near the back of the main lobby and talking about what had happened during the former's exam. It started with the PA system announcing their success over their opponent, Mr. Aizawa, and caught the attention of their classmates. Except, the only thing that seems to be important was the hug between them. Why did she hug you? Izuku leaned against the wall, letting his shoulders slouch in defeat. The ninth inheritor knew his friend was going to ask him, eventually. He scratched his cheek. I don't know. We, managed to work together to beat Mr. Aizawa that we heard the announcement and all of a sudden, she was giving me a hug. I don't believe you. Shoto had trouble believing the story between his friend and their class vice president was that simple. His reason for being doubtful stemmed from what had happened during these last few weeks. Incidents like Stain and the sports festival proved how Izuku was more than willing to help others without even caring about his own safety or feelings. While the camera hadn't followed his classmates after their first encounter with Mr. Aizawa, it didn't take a genius to realize that something had happened prior to their second, more successful, encounter with their homeroom teacher. Granted, their fight wasn't perfect, but Shoto saw the vast improvement when it came to teamwork. You don't believe me? Izuku asked him, curious about his friend's reasoning. Izuku, you are probably the most selfless person I've ever met in life. Shoto decided to get his point across in the most direct way possible. He continued speaking, knowing it was weird for him to talk as much as he was right now. So, don't blame me for thinking you stuck your neck out and tried helping Yaoyorozu. It's the only thing that comes to mind, especially since you're involved. In the time since they've become friends, Shoto had come to learn how much Izuku was willing to give up to help others. Hell, this crazy green-haired BSRD cared more about helping him, a boy consumed by hatred, than winning the famous sports festival. He noticed how his friend's eyes widened after hearing those words. Shoto was thinking he might have crossed the line with his inner thoughts. Sorry. I'm not trying to pressure you into telling me what happened. Didn't mean to sound like Hagakure and Ashido. Did you just try to make a joke? Izuku chuckled at Shoto's attempt at humor. Whatever. As they settled into a comfortable silence, Izuku started to think about the exam and everything that had happened. While thinking about the events that led to their victory, he noticed his classmates talking with each other. Although, he was paying more attention to his raven-haired partner more than everyone else. Izuku saw she was talking to Ashido and Kaminari, who looked very upset for some reason, making him wonder if they failed their exam. Besides his match, there were a few other matches that were currently going on. I hope Uraraka and Ida passed their exam. Izuku wanted his friends to succeed as he knew they had the skills to beat their opponents. It must be tough for Uraraka to fight someone like 13. If I had to fight All Might, that I think things might have been very different for me. To face an opponent like All Might would require cooperation and sheer luck. This is a man considered one of the greatest heroes in Japan's history, and the strongest individual that's ever appeared since quirks had first appeared in their world. He glanced over at his stoic friend. Maybe I should ask Shoto about how it felt to fight All Might. It might be really good information to have in my notebook. I wonder what Momo might think. Wait? Why did I just think about, God, what is wrong with me? That it made him wonder about his standing with the girls in his class. The ninth inheritor knew he wasn't the most appealing guy in the class, especially since his desire to become a hero dominated his life. A mindset he shared with his mentor, who has never expressed any regret towards never starting a family or meeting someone. Granted, he was well aware of the reason behind his mentor's aversion to such ties. All for one, Izuku remembered the story about the so-called symbol of evil, an eternal figure that has been around since quirks had first started popping up. Izuku knew he would be going down a rabbit hole if he kept thinking about his future. Would people accept him as the new symbol of peace? Or would they reject him and say he was nothing more than a copycat? I wonder what Dad would have thought about all of this. 10. Back with Momo. While Izuku was dealing with the numerous questions plaguing his life, the ninth inheritor was not the only person being questioned about the unexpected intimacy between them. In another part of the main lobby, Momo was being constantly questioned by her friends. The creation quirk user knew they were going to be questioned after hugging Izuku for everyone in their class to see. Yet, she was not prepared for the barrage of questions from people like Mina and Toru. They kept asking if there was something brewing between her and Izuku because neither of them had ever spoken until today. Momo had tried explaining the situation, telling them that nothing was happening between them. Oh, come on. Mina groaned, throwing her head back after hearing the truth. She wasn't the only disappointed person, as Toru, the invisible girl in their class, shared her thoughts. Seriously? I was thinking you and Midoriya would have made a cute couple, Toru said, catching the attention of those around her. What? Momo didn't bother to hide her shock. Toru giggled at her friend's reaction. He may be a bit timid and soft-spoken with people, but can any of you say he's not worth giving a shot? I wouldn't mind going out with him. Other than Mina, Toru, and Momo, the only other girl in the main lobby with them was Kyoka. Mina agreed with her invisible friend. Toru has a point about Midori. He's got the whole adorable face, especially those freckles. Plus, there's no denying the boy is a hunk with all those muscles underneath his clothes. All the girls knew Mina and Toru were never shy about sharing their thoughts about the boys in their class. These kinds of conversations always ended with Momo blushing, as she could never muster the courage to express such devious comments. It was only made worse as the raven-haired girl couldn't necessarily deny some level of truth behind those words. I will refrain from commenting on that. It was the only response Momo could give without blushing out of embarrassment. Besides Momo, the only other person who hadn't said anything was Kyoka. The rocker girl had been relatively silent during the conversation, and it seems to finally catch the attention of everyone around her. Unfortunately, someone had taken notice of her silence and decided to see what the musician of their class thought about. What do you think, Kyoka? The question from the invisible girl had gained the attention of the other girls. Yeah, I want to know what you think about him, Mina said. Kyoka was hoping to avoid these types of conversations, considering she was going to be called up for her exam in the next few minutes. The rocker girl was tempted to lie, but out of the corner of her eye, she saw Momo looking at her with curiosity in her eyes. It made Kyoka wonder if her best friend was lying about nothing happening between her and Midoriya. He's a pretty cool guy. Kyoka shrugged her shoulders in a nonchalant manner and gave them an answer. I mean, he stole the show at the sports festival during the one-on-one fights. The guy was crazy enough to break his bones just to fight Todoroki, and then there are the crazy improvements he's made after the hero internships. When she finished speaking about their green-haired classmate, they heard the PA system come to life. Everyone heard the familiar voice of Present Mike. Ochako Uraraka and Yuga Oyama have passed. The next group is Kyoka Jiro and Koji Koda. Can they please report to their testing site? Great, time to fight our English teacher. Kyoka was not looking forward to fighting the hero. She looked at her friends. I'm really not looking to this. Mina couldn't help but mutter, at least you'll have a better chance than me. You'll be fine, Toru said. The creation quirk user turned towards her best friend and nodded. I'm inclined to agree with Toru. I know you'll pass the exam if these last few weekends have proved anything of your determination. Thanks, guys. Kyoka smiled in appreciation. As they watched their friend walk away, Momo felt a bit terrible for lying to her friends. She hadn't stopped thinking about their brief conversation after coming up with a plan to defeat Mr. Aizawa. The creation quirk user couldn't deny how much Izuku's words impacted her, especially since they were able to defeat their homeroom teacher. Well, we haven't said a word to each other after the test concluded. Momo was hoping to talk more with her partner after walking back into the main lobby. Much to her dismay, Izuku had said something about needing to do something, but she was thinking the hug may have been too much for him. Still, it did little to make her stop thinking about their brief moment in that alleyway. 10. During the exam. So, what do you think? Momo was trying her hardest to handle the enormous pressure being placed onto her shoulders. In fact, she was actively questioning if it is possible to create any viable strategy capable of defeating an opponent like Mr. Aizawa, considering the man's background as a pro hero. Factors such as his quirk, experience, and even combat ability are all things Momo needed to take into account because if she miscalculates anything, the recommended student shuddered at the outcome. I don't even want to imagine it. A T-trap? She heard her partner say, hearing the concern in his voice. The creation quirk user knew the risks that came with performing such a strategy, especially since it relied on Midoriya to succeed in gaining their teacher's attention. She reluctantly nodded, giving her partner an answer. It's the only thing I could come up with in such a tight window. Momo saw him shake his head. Yaozu, why you did your best. Midoriya told her. She noticed how he seemed to get quiet after saying those words, making her wonder what was wrong with him. Soon, the alleyway had become eerily silent as neither student knew what to say to the other. Momo suddenly had a thought and, fearful at the idea of failing once more, started to think about what may have been going through his head. Did I do something wrong? She questioned. That simple thought began to snowball, and she had spoken up, catching his attention. But, is it a bad plan? Did I forget to take something into consideration? Or, do you think it won't work? Her partner's eyes widened in shock at hearing all those questions. And not at all, Yaozu. Your plan is really good. Momo watched as her green-haired classmate looked away, causing her to wonder if something was bugging him. Midoriya, what's wrong then? She asked him, wanting a straight answer. I know you don't want to hurt me, but if you think there's something wrong with it, please let me know. The class vice president waited with bated breath. It's not your plan. No, I'm worried that I might screw it up. His words almost seemed to fail to register with her brain. What? Midoriya looked up at her, an awkward smile on his face, and tried to explain himself. I've always struggled to have faith in myself, and so when I hear how quickly you came with that plan, I can't fight back the possibility that I might mess it up, Yaozu. The alleyway had become silent once more, causing the green-haired boy to look towards his partner, hoping to get a response from her. Except, he was greeted with the sight of her seemingly twirling her front bang without much thought. It made him nervous as to what she was thinking about right now. Although, Midoriya would be surprised to learn that his partner was shocked to hear such doubts from him. He thinks he might screw this plan up? Momo had no real response to his explanation, surprised to learn he harbored such thoughts. In all honesty, Momo never really imagined someone like Midoriya having trouble with believing in himself. Throughout the first few months of the school year, Momo had noticed how quickly Midoriya seemed to jump the gap between him and their other, more powerful, classmates like Bakugo and Todoroki. Not everyone could make such a major leap without hard work or belief in oneself. Without really thinking about it, Momo had voiced her opinion. "Mess it up," she repeated that part to him before shaking her head. "No, you'll be fine. I know you can do it, Midoriya." A smile appeared on her face, which she hoped would show Midoriya the faith she had in him. At that moment, he didn't say anything back, but his slow nod and widened eyes were enough for the raven-haired girl to know her partner had gotten the message. The only thing that remained was actually going out and getting the job done. I should, get going then," he said, earning a simple nod from her. She watched as he stood up and walked a few feet away from her. It didn't take long for the familiar bolts of green lightning to surround Midoriya's body, a scene that had always been a source of curiosity for Momo. There was just something interesting about them, and that curiosity had only reached another level after getting to see them up close and personal. "Yaoyorozu." "Yes." Momo noticed the small blush on her partner's face as he seemed to be trying to say something. "I, just wanted to say," he took a pause before turning to face her. The green-haired boy had a small smile on his face. "Why your plan will work. I know it will, Yaoyorozu. And we will pass our final exam." 10. Present time, back with Momo. When she heard those words from her partner, Momo couldn't deny there was something inspiring about Izuku. During the sports festival, the raven-haired girl remembered hearing about how Izuku was willing to break limbs to help Todoroki for some reason. His heroic nature was admired by everyone in their class, including her. It only fueled Momo's decision to get to know Izuku and, maybe, become friends with him. She knew about her classmates' struggle in social settings, as these first few months of school only seemed to reinforce the possibility of him facing bullying in his younger years. In fact, Ochako had always mentioned the early struggles when it came to being friends with their green-haired classmate. Momo definitely held some reservations about wanting to become friends with him. It mostly stemmed from not wanting to seem nosy or weird to Izuku. "And you said there was nothing going between you and Izuku." "Huh?" She jumped back in surprise after hearing Toru speak up. "Don't lie to us." Mina decided to back up her invisible friend. The pink-skinned girl smirked. "You were thinking about Midori, weren't you?" "No." Mina and Toru looked at their class vice president with smirks on their faces, appearing more like sharks after smelling blood in the water. "Sure. Whatever you say." The creation quirk user attempted to defend herself. I wasn't thinking about him. "Will you guys drop it?" "If that's what you want, Yamamoto, then okay." Both girls seemed to drop the subject quicker than Momo would have liked. She knew how much these two loved to gossip about rumors, especially those surrounding romance in their school, and it made her very concerned about what they were thinking. Before she had a chance to further ponder on the situation, Momo heard a few of her classmates cheering in the background. She turned around and saw her fellow class representative, Ida, and Ochako coming back from their exams. There was an announcement for Ochako passing. However, Momo didn't hear anything for the speedster and his partner passing their respective exam. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Izuku walking towards Ochako. There was nothing wrong with that, as they were good friends. Now, the strangest sight was seeing Todoroki walking just behind him. The son of Endeavor never seemed like the kind of person to bother with such formalities, or that was what Momo thought about the only other recommended student in their class. Soon, the group around Ochako had begun shrinking as another pair of students were called to take their exam. This is when she thought of an idea. Maybe I can use this as an opportunity to talk with Izuku. Momo could congratulate her friend for passing the exam, as well as getting an opportunity to talk with her partner and, hopefully, get to know him better. God, I sound like some love-struck teenager from one of my novels. With those final thoughts, the creation quirk user had made up her mind. Today, she was going to befriend the boy known as Izuku Midoriya.